Okay. Ugh. Testing sound, testing the sound, testing sound, testing sound. Testing sound. Testing sound. Okay. Looks good for me. All right. Got questions pulled up. Yep, got all the questions. Phone just in case. Get out of here. Hey, Mike. Hey, Mike.
I'm just kidding. I'm fucking with you, man. I can hear you. Jesus Christ.
Jesus. Just heads up, we are live.
Oh.
No, I'm just saying so, you know, we keep all that patriarchal hate speech to ourselves.
You know, we can't keep the patriarchy to ourselves because we are subconsciously purveying a systematic oppression. That seems like a fine thing to say.
Yeah, that hit the key words. Didn't make much sense, but it was like inflammatory words. That's really all you got to throw out there.
One of my favorite terms that lately has been used is problematic.
Yeah.
I'll say, like, these views are problematic. I'm like, okay, you just don't like them. That's what that means. You don't agree with them. Like, that's ridiculous. What is a grand swath of a critique? Also, when people don't know whether to say systemic or systematic, so they use them interchangeably, and it's just really embarrassing.
Wait, the word cut out went right as you were saying the word, and then it was like, what was it?
Systemic versus systematic.
Oh, yes. Yes.
They'll just use them interchangeably, and it's like, folks, public service announcement or RP plus private service announcement. Systemic means applying to a system or generated by system. Systematic means happening in an ordered way, usually over and over.
Yes.
So if you're getting systematically beat up, that means you're getting beat up over and over. If you're getting systemically beat up, that means your system's beating you up.
Well, Mike, you're getting your whole system's getting beat up. They could both be true at once.
Totally, but they systematically getting beat up by your system. I'm like, wow, that really sucks, man.
Turns out words have meaning. I think that's the first rule of college.
So yeah, not lately.
They might have two different meanings. Yeah, definitely. Oof, man. Well, you ready to get started?
Yes. I do have a Catholic priest hiding in my home because I'm doing some work for the church. So
that put me in a real foul mood too. It's crazy.
As a man that loves the church, James, I imagine it would put you in a foul mood.
I made a post about this like horrific. The grand jury just came out in Pennsylvania citing like all these people who were conspiring to commit child rape through the Catholic Church and perpetuating it. It was just this like horrible, horrible, horrible thing. Just infuriating. What's infuriating is not only like that they're child rapists, right? But that people are willing to cover it up and allow it to continue. It's one thing like turning a blind eye is still bad in this case, but it's another thing to like turn a blind eye, but in such a way that allows them to continue abusing their power to commit child rape. What the fuck?
Yeah.
you kidding me? It's nuts. And it was like hundreds, not just like a couple. They always try to make it seem like it's just like, oh, one or two bad apples. And it was like hundreds of these motherfuckers are involved. It's crazy.
Yeah. That is both systemic and systematic right there.
Yeah. Child rape, unfortunately. Fuck. It's horrible. It just, yeah. Ugh.
Jeez. Drink away your problems, J-Mo.
Yes. It's the only thing that makes me feel less wretched.
Beer.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking unbelievable, mean.
Yeah. I did get a big case of Costco beer, so that's cool.
That is, I don't know how many times that statement's been uttered by anyone other than you. Verbatim.
You know, I think Alex is actually really into the like Costco brand beer. He was like, "Oh yeah, it's not bad. I like it."
That is not a credit to your cause. I guarantee you that. I don't know if Mel's listening or not, but can you get her attention real quick?
She's watching shows also about rape, unfortunately, and eating cheese. So good luck getting her attention.
Okay, never mind. Wow.
In my defense, I didn't get Costco. I got a big case of Kona beer from Costco. It wasn't Costco brand beer this time.
Costco brand beer.
It's even too shitty for me.
But Alex likes it.
Yeah, he was like, "Oh yeah," he was like, "Yeah, I like that. It was good." I was like, "What's wrong with you?" No, it was terrible.
That's the wrong answer.
Yeah.
All right, shall we get into it?
Yes, let's do it. I think there was a pretty extensive list again. Meaty.
All right, let's get to it.
Yeah, you want to read?
All right. Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Okay, Sega Sangare, after waving his hands all Italian-like, says, "Hey Docs, I was wondering if progressing from MEV to MRV through the course of multiple mesocycles would have more benefits over doing it in just one mesocycle. Do you think that approach might be better in some cases?"
Am I missing something here?
No. Yes, I can explain, I think, what he's saying. You go from MEV to like a third of the way to MRV, then you deload. But then you go another 2/3 of the way, you deload, and then you go all the final way, you deload. I can instantly go back to first principles here and ask Sega back a question.
Ooh.
That's the question. You know, like how like goat entrails can predict like the future or whatever. Like my question
I don't know how that works.
You need to read it. How much
What?
have we talked about? Have you learned anything from our satanic lectures?
I thought we were using.
Were you paying attention?
Apparently not. I missed that one.
I remember you playing Game Boy in the back, motherfucker.
Game Boy. I had the big ass Game Boy when it came out in the 90s or whatever. That was sweet.
I was so jealous of people like you because my parents had video games drop my brain. I never got a chance to play any. So,
well,
anyway, you're probably right. So here, Sega, is another question, and then I'll let James tee off on this one because I know he's getting ready.
I'm still maybe not understanding what he's asking. I think I missed it.
So let's say James or MRV, MEV 10, MRV 20. Cool?
Yeah.
Meso 1, you go 10 to 13, deload. Meso 2, you go 14 to 16, deload. Meso 3, you go 17 to 20, deload.
But that's not MEV to MRV.
It is over multiple mesos.
That's like years of mesos, though.
That's like 3 mesos, right?
Are we saying that is a newly defined MEV, or you're just training above MEV to MRV at that point? You know what I mean? Because like if your MEV is 10, that's not changing for a little while.
Yeah. So James, what he's saying is instead of going from MEV to MRV in one meso, he's saying you literally split it up into 3 mesos. So like
just for guess and check purposes, or
no, so here's let me give you my answer, James, and I think that'll get you to sort of get what he's saying here.
Okay.
My question to Sega is, why would you deload if you haven't gotten to at least close to your MRV? Look, what you're basically doing, Sega, in this case, is if you get from 10 to 13 sets, you get some growth. You could have all this momentum. You could continue to go and go and go, and you're cutting yourself off and deloading without the requisite accumulated fatigue to make that happen. So to put it another way, you are deloading way too often if you're doing this, and your accumulation to deload paradigm is not optimal. You're just basically spending a lot of time not getting better. That's it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, James? Like he's literally like so basically Meso 1, he go from 10 to 13, then Meso 2, 13 to 16. So it's basically like, you know, why?
It's
is the better question than why not.
Conservative to the point where like recoverability is not a limiting factor to you training. No. Just you training more is the only thing that needs to happen if you want to perpetuate further gains.
100%. And you know, you could come back with, well, we could make bigger intensity progressions then, but then you're still going from MEV to MRV just through intensity instead of volume. So
yeah,
you still come back to you're just not training hard enough. And shit, we actually, well, Sega, if you've read the Volume Landmarks book, How Much Should I Train? There's a whole chapter in there. If you haven't read it, it'll be a super elucidating for you. In the chapter on MAV, we refute this exact thing over like 10 pages of text. We refute why going from MEV to 1/3 of MEV to MRV is a bad idea. We refute why just training in the middle is a bad idea. And we refute why just training at the tail end is a bad idea. Like literally, right? Every single one of those by themselves is just not optimal because of the stuff you're missing. So for example, if you stop at MEV to 1/3 MRV, then you could have just trained with more volume and gotten more gains. Okay, fine. What about the middle part? If you train from, you know, like 1/3 MEV to 2/3 MEV or MRV distance, well, then, you know, your just run up is real short, and it's a little bit shocking. Like starting a mesocycle at 13 sets is kind of a lot. Like it's a bit too disrupted, too sore, so on and so forth. And then what's wrong with, you know, the last one is it's again too short, but also, you know, you're sort of not getting the easy gains that you could at, you know, 10 sets, 12 sets, 14, 16 sets. You're going like right to 17 sets right off the bat. No, first of all, it's an incredible amount of disruption right off the bat. Second of all, like, you know, you're missing these super easy gains and a ton of momentums. Why the fuck would you do that? Basically.
You'll be more prone to non-functional overreaching when you don't want it to happen later
100%.
as well.
100%.
Yeah, I would avoid that.
Yeah. All right. Next question from Sega says, "Hey guys, I have a question about targeting the rectus femoris."
we'll just throw him a bone on that one. Rectus
femoris. Sure. Rectus femoris. There's a bit of speculation here, but I have noticed that people who rely mostly on squats, less leg presses, don't tend to have a developed rectus femoris. Powerlifters maybe, but very good vastus. I have seen some evidence to suggest that EMG activity in the rectus femoris is higher during exercises like leg extensions, since it's a biarticular muscle. It does make sense to me that an exercise like that would have a higher activation on an exercise compared to squats and leg presses, because my understanding is these kinds of muscles can't pull at both insertions effectively, and the squat leg press have the rectus femoris shortened at the hip and lengthened at the knee. This could then lead to having not much work to do. This reminds me potentially of a case of the hamstrings and squats. Another thing is that there are clips of Tom Platz doing hacks where basically does a sissy squat motion while standing on his toes. I think this exercise would target the rectus femoris in a better way, but I'm not sure of the safety of said exercise in the long term. Do you think there is a merit to try and find a type of compound or isolation exercise that best stimulates this muscle? P.S. Jared Feather seems to have good development of the area, even though I haven't seen him perform leg extensions. Thanks. Jared Feather is a genetic freak. That's all that needs to be said about that. I think your logic is relatively sound. I'm curious what James is going to think, but yeah, I think that leg extensions is potentially sort of almost ideally doing leg extensions while laying back as far as you can will lengthen that muscle as much as possible and give it predominance, especially with a hard peak contraction at the bottom or at the top, I think is a real good idea. And in addition to that, the Tom Platz sissy squat thing where he stands on his toes and descends is absolutely a great way to target that muscle. That being said, you know, leg extensions are safe in the long term if you're careful about them. The sissy squats, I think, need to be like real, like personal individual exploration where it's real easy to fuck yourself over. It's really easy to overdo them. Dope them in slow. Make sure they're not the predominance of your muscle mass. See how it goes. because it's real. You can really fuck yourself over chronically with that kind of exercise. So you got to really play it by ear. Some people have knees that can tolerate it just fine. Some folks it just never work. James.
Yeah, I think that was a solid answer. So for me, the knee extension has been this kind of oddity that I've been exploring lately, because it's one of the exercises, like as you mentioned, that really hits my medial quads and the rectus femoris area as well, better than a lot of other more traditional quad exercises like squats and leg presses. We actually had a funny conversation with Eric Helms about this when we were in Australia, and he suggested that it was largely due to occlusion, just from the fact that you have to sit in that bent position in the machine, which is probably a pretty good, reasonable explanation. But anyways, getting back to that, so I think that's a really good isolation movement for that particular region within the quadriceps, but you don't get a big bang for your buck for doing that exercise per unit of volume comparatively with things like squats and leg presses, which even if they're not specifically hitting that particular region, they're hitting a massive amount of quadriceps in general. That being said as well, I have started experimenting with sissy squats in my programs, and I can only report what I have found. To me, that is another good exercise where you can kind of hit a lot of that medial quad meat. But a couple things that I have noticed. One, if you see people doing it online, a lot of the times they'll use a Smith machine and do like a feet elevated, like on a bench or something. That's a really good way of putting yourself in a compromised position where you can easily slip up, fall, spill, the bench can slide, whatever. And that can really be gnarly for the knees. It's also one of those situations where you're really, really displacing it far forward in like an unnatural way that you would, I don't want to say unnatural, but like in a way that is never going to translate into any other movement other than that. And it's another way of loading it up really, really heavy. So what I have found for me specifically is doing them in a pre-fatigued state, either with dumbbells, a belt, or like a belt squat style setup after you've already done the bulk of your quad work. And doing it on a relatively stable surface seems to be a pretty good way of hitting it. What I would not recommend doing it is doing sissy squats relatively fresh, because you're going to need a fuckload of weight in order to actually get anything out of it. So for me, as like a pre-fatigued movement, seems to be pretty good. I would only do that after my main squatting and pressing is done, and I really get a good pump in that medial quad meat from doing it. So for me, yeah, those are the two that I go to, is the knee extension and the sissy squat now. That's a recent development for the medial quad stuff.
Great stuff, James. Nothing to add. That's really good. Okay, so let's see. Last question for him. Hey, docs, as it's been discussed, the principle of progressive overload has a two-part definition in that regard. When you consider that a certain load on the bar reaches the overload threshold and you perform 3x10 without ever making changes to set and rep scheme, as well as keeping the same load, could we expect gains to come in a logarithmic fashion until no gains are made? I'm actually not entirely sure on the mathematical shape of that curve. I will say that gains will come in some kind of an exponential fashion. It'll be a curvilinear relationship. I'm not sure if it's logarithmic. That's very, very likely.
I think it's fair to say that it'll be asymptotic at some point.
Yeah, it's for sure asymptotic, and then eventually just cuts to maintenance. Yeah, maybe. But I think that the general, I think it may be not so productive to specify the exact kind of mathematical relationship, but I think it's definitely an asymptotic one, and thus, overload is definitely something that's a good idea to do. It's funny because you'll get people defending all kinds of static relationships that I think is funny. They'll say, intensity progression is great. Like, what about volume progression? I'm like, no, don't do that. Like, why not? They're like, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. That's sweet.
So. They're like, why do you have to open up with don't do that? Just say, I don't know.
Yeah. Like,
or 10 times more points with that person right off the bat.
For sure. 100%. All right. Ido Dagul says, hello, Mike and James. Please don't make fun of my name. I bet you will, though.
Sounds like an Italian dish. Yo, I got some Ido Dagul over here.
You like the ghoul? My mama makes the best fucking the ghoul. You fucking fuck.
This is only for the keto Guidos.
Or keto Guido. Oh my God, James! I think you just made a fucking unbelievable website idea.
No, I can't take credit for that. It was on Jersey Shore.
Shit.
That would be a good website.
Ido Dagul also sounds like an evil overlord. Ido Dagul.
Yeah.
It sounds like like we're speaking Orcish.
Exactly. If you say it real sharp and staccato, it's definitely very orcish.
Idodakul.
Idodakul.
Orcs
Very
always
fitting
pissed.
my shirt today as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Got the AD&D.
James, have you seen Bright?
Yes, with Will Smith on Netflix. It was good.
Yeah. Hey, quick review. Do you like it?
I did like it. So like people gave it a whole bunch of shit. It's one of those where you got to just kind of like what am I trying to say? You can't be overly critical. You can't be like, okay, but how does this all fit into the actual history of the world?
Who gives a shit, you fucking assholes? Orcs aren't real. That's the first problem.
Yeah, like there was no orcs with Thomas Jefferson or Ben Franklin, so it's just let it go. Just run with it. You got to just run with it.
Just imagine that there's an infinite number of possible universes, and this is one of them. Because if it's an infinite number, this is sure as hell possible. Fuck you.
It's not our world. It's a parallel world where
almost
identical happened.
I mean, that's called pretend.
Yeah.
That easy.
So if you're willing to do that and just go along for the ride, it's great. But if you want to be like a fucking nitpicky asshole about it, like be like, well, who invented the light bulb? Like just fuck off at that point, right? Like just
an elf, probably.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's one of those, I think people gave it was really ambitious. That's what I liked about it, because it really incorporated a lot of
imaginative too.
Yeah, it incorporated a lot of like modern theme with sci-fi, with fantasy, and it was just like a big crazy free-for-all of all those ideas. So I liked it. It was like I said, ambitious, I think is a good word for it, because I don't really see a lot of stuff like that, which is great.
No, it's super creative. Let me tell you another thing. Though they were mentioned by one of the characters, not a single dwarf appeared in the actual movie.
Dude, the Infinity War dwarf scene got me so bad because it was such like a big running pun. I just couldn't like contain myself. Peter Dinklage, who is a dwarf, played the dwarf who was ironically giant.
That was that trip to see like a giant dwarf.
It was so good.
Peter Dinklage needs to take a break from acting because he's like too good of an actor. Every time I see him on anything, I'm like, this is going to be too good, and I'm going to have like nightmares about it or some shit. Like, he's so good.
He's all up in that Marvel stuff too.
Oh man, great shit.
Remember when he was in Days of Future Past as like the weird mustachioed scientist?
Days of Future Past,
the X-Men movie.
Oh yeah,
they were like trying to assassinate him.
Yeah, he did not like mutants a whole lot. I loved it. That was great. All right. Let's see. Ida Nagul says, would an intermediate need more than one maintenance phase a year, with rest being 2 to 3, or with the rest being 2 to 3 to 1 massing to mini cut mesos and cutting mesos?
It would depend on how much cutting you actually did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Assuming a relatively lean starting point and then following like massing mini cut paradigms, I don't know. I'm maybe not willing to say one, but probably not many. But if you start off fat or heavy, probably more than a few.
Because you need to take them after cutting.
That would be my guess.
Yeah. Number 2, indicators of muscle being more slow/fast twitch, in addition to pump, low MRV, strength, stamina, etc. For example, my chest and tries to never get a burn. They just kind of give out. When fatigued and high rep training doesn't seem to do much, there's just a higher chance they're faster twitch.
Yeah.
If they also happen to be relatively strong for their size and very explosive, then you're starting to get some more evidence. Remember, a lot of these are neural factors and anthropometric factors, technical factors, whole host of things. So none of these by itself is really a good indicator. But when all of them align, it becomes a better indicator.
If you notice that your 2 from fail seems to last for 3 sets of 10, you might be
slow fast twitch. 100%. All right, a more theoretical question has been proposed by some evidence-based individuals that because diminishing returns of muscle gain over time, the calorie surplus should also decrease with the same relativity. But if we graph out the diminished muscle gain curve and the increase in need of fat gain curve, it is my assumption that the more advanced you are, the larger the surplus should be within reason, while accepting the tough reality of ever-increasing ratio of fat to muscle. Thought, Ido, that you are really thinking what I would consider next level for sports science. So congratulations. I mean, so folks that say the first comment that, well, as you get more advanced, you need to like reduce your, your surplus. It could almost put it another way and say, okay, your surplus is your best weapon for gains. You're reducing the firepower of your best weapon. For what reason? And then they're like, well, you just get fat. And like you point out, maybe you have to get fatter and fatter to see the same rates of muscle gain. To be honest, I think the likely answer, as far as I'm concerned, we'll see what James thinks, is actually in the middle of like, you kind of have to have the same surpluses, you just get less out of them. If you chase the same muscle growth, you'll just get way too fat. But if you reduce the surpluses, then you'll just get a whole lot of nothing. So I think shooting the middle, just accepting that a bigger proportion of the rates will be fat and a smaller is muscle, but there's not much you can do about that. And if you want more muscle, period, you just have to get super duper irresponsibly fat. I think that is the reality. So shooting the middle, I think, is always good for all levels of development, and you just kind of have to accept what's going on. James?
I think this is a great opportunity to compare and contrast two different sports just with what you just said. So if your goal is to be like the biggest, most muscular guy in the world, strongman is a great example of that, right? Where you are just trying to put on size, period. Doesn't really matter how you get there. And in that case, using a bigger surplus is probably in your favor. Whereas something like bodybuilding, because you have to not only be large, but you have to step on stage at the lowest body fat that you can reasonably obtain, now you have a major trade-off, because if you just chase calorie surplus, that's also more time spent cutting, which is potentially more time losing muscle as well. So there's a middle ground there. And I think that's what Mike was exactly saying, where chasing the surplus may give you more muscle, but then it also has its own negative consequences specific to the sport. Whereas in strongman, you don't see that same relationship.
I couldn't have put it better myself, man. Yeah, that's right on. To be completely honest, I think this is one of these things. It's a self-solving problem or self-aligning solution. It's not really a solved problem. Two examples. One is the direct example here. We're getting an absolute value or something close to it. Kind of solves our problem a little bit. So I'll put it this way. If you are 160 and you want a mass gain, it might be a correct idea to gain 20 pounds to 180. A lot of that's muscle, some is fat. If you are years later going from 220 and you think, how much should I gain? I think the answer is still 20 pounds. Because relatively that's smaller, but it's still not like, oh, but I get really fat now, so I'm just going to gain 10. Because then you're really cutting yourself a fucking raw deal. So I think the answer is probably it's still just 20 pounds. Now, relatively speaking, it's not as much muscle and it's a little bit more fat, but it's still the same magnitude. You don't have to worry about getting in shape and out of shape and so on and so forth. Another perfect example of that is, how much weight should you add to the bar every microcycle? For barbell movements, a good answer, maybe not the best, is 5 pounds, 2.5 kilos per week. Somebody could say, but what if you're really weak? Well, then if you're really weak, you're just starting lifting, that amount of weight is probably something you can make adaptations with at that rate. So it's a really good rate. But if you're really strong, then because you're probably really well trained, you make such slow adaptation that 5 pounds is, again, the right thing. You see how that works? So it's kind of like if your entire career, when you start lifting, you add 5 pounds to the bar every week, deload, repeat, so on and so forth. You can probably keep adding 5 pounds to the bar like your entire training career, because the relative increase in strength adjusts for the relative decrease in fractional strength increase. Does that make sense, James?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the absolute value stays the same and the relatives sort of handle themselves.
Yeah, totally. No, it was a very thoughtful question, and it's kind of
very good question.
It's always good to have some context too, because sometimes when we talk about just health and fitness, so much of it is middle ground that you have to kind of outline the extremes, where you say, okay, well, here's an extreme example of that on one side and the other side.
Yes, here's why the middle ground is rational. And also, I think this is a good point for all of you folks at RP Plus, and most of you guys do this already. Just want to reemphasize, think things through, make sure they make sense. You'll hear stuff from very smart people like James and I, will make mistakes. We'll have wrong ideas. And if it doesn't make sense to you after you think it through, it's not good enough. And you got to either ask somebody, talk to somebody, keep thinking it yourself, keep reading, really try to get at stuff, because that's how progress is made. I think if you just accept something evidence-based people say, you never give it any thought, like even just a dry run through in your head, like, oh, I guess that makes sense. Then you're not thinking much, and you could just be sort of standing on the shoulders of the opposite of giants, where you end up just standing on other people's mistakes. People do that all the time. People do that all the time, and you got to think it doesn't make sense for you. And if it does, sweet. But if it doesn't, yeah, get into it and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, it's the same critical thinking skills are used by those same people to look at things like, so if somebody was to be like, I think that orcs are real, you would be like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm going to look it up and verify if there's any instances of orcs in the real world, right? But those same people in the context of exercise are willing to take something at face value that seems ridiculous. So just keep in mind, like, you applied this same thought process to all sorts of things that are very cut and dry. People who are anti-religious say the same thing, or people who are anti, ghosts or whatever. Same thing, right? They're like, oh, this is ridiculous. Why that's not real. Same logic applies here, right? Like, can you verify, does this fall in line with what we think are facts and the theory and all that stuff? So
Yep. Yeah, and reasonable is one good filter, but there's tougher filters. There's defensible against major critiques. Something can be reasonable seeming, but some major critiques apply to it, it's not defensible. Like the exact rate, the thing you put up, like, well, you should lower your surplus as you keep gaining weight. Like, it doesn't pass a whole lot of major assault on it. That sucks, right? Like, if you can shoot a hole through it that easy, maybe it's not something to take religiously. So, all right, Daniel Hacker comes in and says, probably some dumb shit. Please tackle the myths. Does weight training stunt your growth, and pressing overhead stunts your growth? Please destroy.
James? Well, okay, so let me actually start off in a different direction, because it's not necessarily a please destroy. There is evidence to suggest that doing, I don't want to say weight training specifically, but doing really voluminous and intense, rigorous exercise can potentially have negative side effects on adolescents, right? And this is something that's like well documented in gymnastics. Now, most of those gymnasts tend to be small to begin with, but it is suggested that a lot of the rigor that they do could have potentially stunted some of their growth. Now, that being said, moving on, what we have found is that training for sport and doing weight training and resistance training within very, very reasonable programming parameters for adolescents and youth is very healthy, very good, and does not necessarily stunt growth within reasonable boundaries. And what I mean by reasonable boundaries is you're not giving them like 30 sets a week of squat or something ridiculous. If they are essentially training within their MRVs, which they may or may not know because they're young, but you can use the same evaluation criteria to establish it. If they are training within their MRVs, weight training is very productive, very good, promotes health, promotes sport performance, and does not substantially stunt growth. However, really, really crazy exercise in large doses is bad for a variety of reasons, and at developmental time points can potentially be negative in some cases, not all cases. So it's just one of those things you got to be careful of. But essentially, yes. Does weight training stunt your growth? For the most part, no, when done reasonably. And by reasonably, I think everyone who's listening to me speak right now would understand what that means. Not doing anything that is beyond their capability of tolerance. I mean, that's really all I got.
Yep, agreed. I have nothing to add. Next question. If an athlete needs to increase the vertical leap for their sport.
Sorry, did you want to do the pressing? Or did you want to just go?
Oh, yeah, that's just fucking, I don't even know where that came from. That just falls under lifting. Everything James says for lifting, overhead pressing doesn't supply any more force to the spine than squatting or anything like that. So same. I don't know why the fuck.
You could say, like, from a chronic, very longitudinal standpoint, lifting does stunt your growth as the result of compression and from gravity from the external load. But I mean, that's like we're talking on the scale of millimeters over the lifetime. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
So
it decompresses while you sleep anyway. So
yeah, exactly. So.
there it is, millimeters, man. You missed the dunk in the NBA by that many millimeters.
Exactly.
All right. If an athlete needs to increase the vertical leap for their sport, how would you go about doing so?
Get strong first.
So I mean, you could just, there's a whole science to this. Depends on the training age and a lot of other factors. But generally speaking, if we start at the beginning, we develop general good movement patterns combined with hypertrophy training for the lower body. Then we switch to much predominantly strength training and continuing good movement patterns, learning how to jump. And then when you're peaking and or training at a high level, you do a lot of high velocity / explosive training with lighter weights, close to their actual unloaded jump. And within a certain macro cycle, it would look very similar to that. So the ratios of the phases would be a little different depending on the needs. And that's basically how you do it. And then towards the end of each phase, you practice the most vertical leaping, actually exactly how they're going to leap in the sport, and peak them. And there you go.
Yeah, that's largely it. There is some evidence to suggest that there are developmental milestones that seem to be beneficial before moving into specific power-related training. And this is very, very general, very, very vague, admittedly. But there have been suggestions that like males should be able to squat roughly twice their body weight, females about 1.5 times, before they really, really start benefiting specifically from doing power-related training. Can they benefit before that? Sure. But what I think that suggests more than anything, and Mike, feel free to correct me if you don't agree with this, is that if you are not squatting roughly those numbers, maybe not exactly those numbers, probably the limiting factor is just strength at that point, not necessarily your ability to generate high power outputs, but really you just don't generate very high force outputs yet. That's why it's a developmental milestone.
Yep, and I would say that it's not even. You could phrase it as a limiting factor, and then another way to phrase it is just an opportunity cost. Like if you did strength training, you would jump higher than if you did power training, if you're not strong enough yet.
Right.
Once you're strong enough, power training works better than strength training to make you jump higher.
That's a great point. Absolutely.
All right. Next one, if you're working with a young athlete, sub 15, and you notice they have a tendency to really fold forward when they squat, as in they look like the bottom of the good morning as soon as they start to squat down.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
He's talking about basketball players, I think, because I know that's the population he works with, and they're just horribly inflexible.
Yeah. Would you do exercises to improve their back and posterior chain strength to get rid of this problem, or would you simply not put them into that position and just find other exercises? No one has to squat unless they're a powerlifter or weightlifter, so if getting deep squat position while maintaining an upright torso is problematic for the athlete, maybe just give them other moves and don't sweat it. Well, so Daniel, we're going to go back to basics on this one. Before a problem has a solution, it needs a diagnosis. It needs a stem. It is by no means clear that folding forward is always and everywhere a back and posterior chain strength problem. It's probably not. It's probably a problem of technique. Say that again?
I would actually argue it's not. The fact that they're folding over means that they're strong enough to maintain,
100%.
But they're just probably too either unskilled or inflexible to move down at that point.
Yep. So then, easy. James set it up. I'll knock it out. You got to figure out if they're to what combination or degree they're unskilled versus inflexible. And like if they can do a stiff-legged deadlift with lots of weight, and they can maintain a neutral spine very deep, then it's clearly not inflexible. Then it's a technical issue. And there's a reason some technical issues happen. One is just motor learning. Natural movement patterns are different. And another one is, if you're working with basketball players, you can tell this is almost certainly the case. They have real long femurs and a real short torso, and that's the only way they're ever going to squat, because it's physically impossible to squat any other way.
Yeah.
And because they have a real short torso and long femurs, even though the forces are pretty high through the spine because they have to bend over a lot, the net forces are not any higher than they would be with someone with a long torso. It just spread over a shorter area. So it's really not that big of a deal. So they can continue to squat there's nothing. If you have a tight lower back, there's nothing wrong with a Layne Norton squat if you have a tight lower back. The real thing is, if they have a tight lower back, just get them to stay a little bit more upright, and they're probably totally cool. You can widen their stance a little bit, put them on weightlifting shoes. That usually improves things a lot. If they do round their back and you just can't fix it any other way, belt squats, leg presses, stuff like that are probably better. But generally speaking, I've worked with tons of basketball players, so has James. Work with volleyball girls. They're built very interestingly, similarly. It's usually not a problem. You just got to work with them and get them to where they're squatting in a way that is decent. Just arch lower back and chest up, and they can cantilever over plenty, and there's not a damn thing wrong with that.
Yeah, man, I gotta tell you, I have a huge boner for the belt squat lately. It's definitely on my like persons or thing of interest lately. I had been wanting to try it for so long, and then when we finally got to Australia, Scott had one, and I was able to use it, and it's awesome. It's like everything that's great about squatting with less fatigue.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely try to use the belt squat pretty soon because we have one in Iron Sport.
Do you? Oh, you gotta. Oh, it's a little bit of it's you gotta kind of set it up, and like you're on the shorter side, so you might have to like pull the safety all the way out. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a fuss to set up, but once you get it set up, man, I was so enthused about it. I was like,
I mean, it removes the axial load from squatting, which is incredible.
Yes. And you got the little handholds there. You can do it low bar or high bar style. Like Scott was giving me shit, but I was doing it like super, super high bar after my quad workout. And so I was just trialing it. And he was like, how much weight you got on there, you little pussy? And like, I didn't get very many reps. And he was like, oh, we have ladies who do more than you. I was like, get the fuck out of here, Scott. Quit giving me shit. I'm just messing around. But I was, it blew my legs up, man. I tell you what. And it's like one of those, like, I don't like to use the term finishers, but man, like once you have tapped out on your squats, like barbell squats, throw that motherfucker in there and you can get a lot of work done. It's cool.
Yep.
I like it.
Yeah, I really need to invest in this. Biomechanically, it checks out every single box. Okay.
Especially like you got big legs. Like, it's got the amount of volume that you could add in squatting movements would be really interesting. Yeah,
agreed. All right. Another one, sex drive increases during maintenance. Following mass phase, have you guys found this? If so, what's going on? My sex drive is always highest during maintenance phases. Is just me. I can understand a maintenance after a cut might allow an individual to experience an increase in sex drive due to an increase in food and decrease in stress, but after a mass, man, what's happening? I'll tell you at least two things that are possible contributors. One, sex drive almost always, in the acute term, not the chronic term, inversely correlates to training volume. This was discovered in some part when they started having Olympic villages set up for Olympic athletes. And they realized that as soon as the athletes tapered off of their usual excessive volumes, their sex drives would reach like clinical levels, and they had to put condom dispensing machines in all of the dormitories, or else like sexually transmitted infections became a serious problem. Not a joke.
Sorry, real quick. I like that because like when we grew up, it was STDs, and now the common terminology is STIs. I wonder if the disease was like, is that like an SJW thing? What is the deal?
It's not. Disease is a chronic state. Infection can be something that you take antibiotics for and it goes away. So not everything is a disease, but everything you can contract is an infection. In addition to that, disease can be non-infectious. Like if you have advanced kidney disease, you could have not get an infection of it. You just fucked your life up with alcohol or something, right? So it's the infection is more technically correct.
No, it's just interesting because that's
but like you're totally
much happened somewhere, and it seemed like I missed it.
Yeah, it seems like an SJW thing. By the way, just a news flash. In schools, at least, I spoke to somebody who teaches school in New Jersey, and they no longer call it special needs. They call it.
You mean like the disabilities department or something else?
Yeah. They call it something like, I'm blanking on what they call it, but it's something completely different. You would never guess what it is. It's just one of those things like it's just.
This is not politically correct to say, but I'm just going to go for it. I have no problems with persons with various disabilities or however you want to phrase it. I don't mean to be insulting in any way, but some of the students in my classes would really take advantage of the situation and like forget and miss like testing sessions even after special accommodations were made, and not because of incompetency, just because they were, being lazy and being derelicts about it. There were not all, but there were several students who would do that consistently, and it was really starting to get under my skin because you have to, as an administrator or as a professor, you have to make accommodations for them, and they have all this documentation, and you have to, and it's fair, and you have to acknowledge it, and then you have to like send it off to the testing centers and do all this stuff, and it's a big pain in the butt. And when they miss it for whatever reason, it's a huge pain in the ass. And I had several students who would consistently do that just because they were lazy, and it just got annoying.
It's super unfortunate to be taking advantage of such a sensitive thing.
Yeah,
very scumbag move.
It's a scumbag move in the sense of like, okay, most students will do that anyway, but then you have this layer of bureaucracy on top of it, which makes it like incredibly cumbersome. That's like what got me. Yeah,
agreed. Interestingly enough, all the special needs students I ever had were actually really on top of shit, which is really encouraging.
That's good.
It's what I expected, so I was pleasantly
maybe they were trolling me. Maybe they knew I hated all that paper.
I guess. It's full of hate. All right. So the sex drive thing. So, where were we? Yeah, STDs, Olympic athletes, training volume. When you cut your volume from something high to something lower, you're less in fight or flight mode. You're more parasympathetic. Your sex drive goes up. Easy solution. Second one, at the top of a mass phase, you have more body fat. Body fat converts some of your testosterone to estrogen. A higher estrogenic environment within some boundaries starts to be a very, very, very big potentiator of sex drive. If you ever take substances that decrease your estrogen considerably, you will notice the opposite effect on sex drive. Letrozole, for example. If you take Letro, don't do it. It's a really stupid idea. Unless you have a very specific purpose. It'll make you forget why sex is even a thing. You just totally tune out. You're like, man, I have no idea what the hell people ever have sex for. It's that powerful. So more estrogen, still have lots of testosterone, and your TC ratio is probably even higher because you're at lower training volume, combined with lower training volume itself, and all of a sudden you're trying to get it on.
Take the letrozole and you're like, I don't understand why people like Spartacus and Game of Thrones. This show's not that great.
All of a sudden you're off Letro, you're like, God damn.
The first couple times I saw Spartacus and I was like, wait, you can just see Lucy Lawless, Xena, naked? That's it?
I don't even want to see it. It'll
change. Like my childhood fantasy come true. What the fuck?
Dude. Lucy Lawless is everything that is a woman.
Yeah. I mean, so I got nothing. I was going to go the parasympathetic route, so you already beat me to it. So.
Yeah. All right, related to the previous question, so please include in the same paragraph if you can.
Oh.
Nope. Sex drive feels higher in maintenance than at any point during the mass, except for maybe microcycle 1. I know sex drive may be lessened during overreaching. Related. So I wanted to add that because that's not the case here, I don't think sex drive feels higher in maintenance than on any point during the mass, except for maybe microcycle 1.
I'll just throw this out there because
but that makes total sense with the overreaching thing.
Yeah, no, it does. I'll also throw this out there. End of mass, you're not your sexiest, so sometimes confidence and efficacy can play a role into sex drive.
But I guess maintenance, you're not your sexiest either. So,
but then you also drop off all the training fatigue. So like then that's probably
for sure. Yeah, top of mass, you're a fat piece of shit. You're so overreached, and you're like, fuck sex drive.
Yeah, you're just like, no one wants me. I'm hideous.
You're probably correct.
Yes.
Michelle, is it Michael Karam or Michelle Karam?
I was wondering the same thing, and I didn't want to get it wrong.
Michelle it is. Michelle Karam says, hello, Dr. Mike and Dr. James. Thanks for the answer last week. My question is about metabolite training. Do I really need to do metabolite training?
No.
I like to know more about the physiological benefits of metabolite training because I know it's time efficient like drop sets. Can you help you do more volume in less time? But is there any additional benefits? Not really. And should it be done in a cutting phase, or is it better to keep it on a mass phase where the MEV and MRV range is wider? It can be done on both towards the end of the phases, because after a metabolite phase, you've pissed away so much volume tolerance that you really need to do a low volume phase, and you can't do that either while you're gaining or while you're cutting.
Yeah, it's an advanced tool in the toolkit. It's used. I would say for intermediates and advanced athletes, specifically who are trying to gain muscle. So then it becomes kind of I don't want to say an intensification type thing, but it's an advanced strategy for training for hypertrophy.
Yep. All right. Marcia Balai is back saying, hi, docs. Get ready for a long one. Oh, boy.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
I'm trying to calculate my SRE curves. Say that again?
That's what she said. I just want to throw it in there.
Damn. Oh, damn.
Ready for a long one?
She said, Jesus, what is she sticking in you?
A big dildo.
Well, that's hot. All right. I'm trying to calculate my SRA curves and was curious if I'm doing things right. I'm using the male physique templates. So push-pull legs type split, and I'm taking into account the cross-contamination effect of certain exercises. As an example, a set of compound pressing for chest shoulders is a 1/2 set for tricep. So if micro 1 on Monday, I'm doing 3 sets of bench, 3 of shoulder press, and 3 of sculls. That would equal 6 total sets of triceps. Okay, makes sense. The next time I hit triceps Friday, but I feel fully recovered on Thursday. After Friday's workout, I recover by Sunday. Does this mean that I should try to increase frequency for triceps from 2 to 3 times per week? Or should I increase my sets so that the workout fucks me up more? I think the answer to that is either one works almost identically. James?
Yeah, I would say exactly that. The only difference, the big deciding factor would be this. If you increase sets so it fucks you up more, does that subsequently inhibit the downstream workouts in some way, where you might increase the sets on one day, but then your triceps are still fucked up, and the next time you have another pushing movement, even if it's meant to be a light session, is inhibited? That would be one of the differentiating factors for me if I was looking at that. But normally, I think Mike and I would agree. Sometimes, if time permitting, it is nice to have more frequency, but it's not necessarily better. Probably the weekly volume, if that's consistent across both strategies, doesn't matter much.
Yeah. Greg Knuckles actually just did a great review on frequency, and so did James Krieger. James came to the conclusion that frequency almost doesn't matter between 2 to 5 sessions a week. Greg Knuckles says it's a little better to train more frequently, but for larger body parts, for more experienced lifters, and for people that train with a lot of total volume in their programs, it makes less and less and less of a difference. And I would say that for advanced lifters, sometimes it could be the opposite, where too much frequency is bad. The big ticket with frequency is, can your joints handle it? Because almost everyone who's ever tried high frequency and isn't 16 years old and a YouTube, forum warrior who thinks it's the greatest thing ever because they have never fucking done anything else, will tell you that frequency, how long you can do high frequency for and how high the frequency can go, is your muscles are fine. They'll recover just fine as long as the weekly total volume is manageable. It's the joints that have a problem potentially. So it's really how much can your joints take. So I would say if you increase from 2 to 3 sessions, make sure to spread your volume out. See if your triceps, elbows, shoulder joints, if they're not taking a huge beating. If they're not, I think you're good to go. Or do that for as long as they don't. But if you notice, like, oh, this is just too much pressing through the week and there's not enough time for my shoulders to really recover, then you're probably back to two times a week.
I think it's good. Yeah. I think, Mike, what do you think? So if all that being considered, we already knocked it out, but would you say step one would be increase the session volume, or step one should be increase the frequency? You know what I mean? Like, which one would you trial first?
I think it depends on the age, the training age of the athlete. For beginners, increase the frequency. For beginners, increase the frequency. For intermediates, either works. For advanced, increase the per session volume, because frequency increases for advanced, they're not realistic usually because joint stress will be the big downside there. For beginners, increasing frequency is probably a good idea.
Perfect.
Yeah. And then for intermediates, it's really your call, because I think they're both gonna result in about the same thing. All right. Does this mean that I should try to increase frequency for triceps 2 to 3 more times a week? Should increase my sets so that the workouts fuck me up more? Okay. And so then I also think measuring SRA curves in the first microcycle is probably not the best idea. If training is too light, measuring in the meso 4 is not a good idea because systemic fatigue can interfere with SRA curves. So micro would be best suited to measure SRA curves. I have a feeling that micro 3 would be the best in a 4-to-1 paradigm. And that micro 1, you recover a day early. At your next training session, micro 2, you recover just in time for the next training session. Micro 3, you can overload in the next training session, but you're not fully recovered. And micro 4, you can barely overload in the next training session, or can no longer overload and you deload. Any thoughts or recommendations? Well, I'll give you a real good answer, Marcia. You got to know your SRA curve for all of those because you're going to do them all, right? Like, it doesn't help you to know what you would call your SRA curves for micro 3, because you just have data to apply on micro 3. It's useless for micro 1 of your next meso. Like, let's find out you knew your SRA curves. Look how long it takes you to recover on a micro 3. So then, you know, do you micro 4, you have your information. You do micro 4, you do a deload, then you do micro 1. So what are you going to program? Well, how the fuck are you supposed to know is you didn't take micro 1 data. Take all the data and have an average. Say, okay, my SRA curve is the following for micro 3 and micro 2 and micro 1 and micro 4. And because it's micro 1, I kind of know how to do things because I have data on everything. So that would be my answer. James?
Yeah, I would only give this answer, and you'll see where I'm going with this. I would say 2 or 3, but only because they represent essentially what will be the average for the mesocycle.
Yeah.
But it's not that those particular mesocycles are more or less telling, but they're just right in the middle, which is usually what you're going to go off of.
Just get ready to change it as needed.
Yeah, exactly.
Daniel Jolly. Hi, docs. Misspelled on purpose.
Or
Daniel's
are you high?
Fucking comedian.
And on a dock. A boat
That's
dock.
true. Have you had experience with a drop in energy when switching from mini cut back to mass after the first few days? Yes. I have kind of like the sudden thrusting energy supply energizes you for a few days, and then you pay for it anyway because you're still only have one gut and one brain, etc. You get a bit wiped out. Tis the story of my last 2 mass mini cut switches. I'm not too concerned, by the way, just interested in resting for a few days. Isn't too difficult to figure it out. Yeah, I think you just get back into a food coma, Daniel, because that is what happens. When you're mini cutting, you're kind of like, ooh, I'm energized. You got a little fight or flight going because of a hypocaloric diet. When you get back to mass, you got 2 things. One, you turn real parasympathetic again, which is really good, right? Because you're growing and recovered. But also it gives you, definitely makes you sleepier. And in addition to that, you get into a food coma. So those 2 things, like, yeah, when I'm on mass, I'm like, fuck, and I can sleep for 10 hours because Jesus Christ, like, you eat yourself into fucking sleep.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I have a question too. Do you find the variability in MRVs from person to person surprising? Have you done any statistical analysis on it? No, but I don't know about surprising. I think the term I would use is impressive. Impressive would be my term. James?
I guess. I mean, like, it's always surprising when the reference point is yourself, because you know what I mean? Like, when you're like, this is what I do, and then you see someone else and you're like, what the fuck? But at the same time, like, when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, this person is a 19-year-old collegiate, rugby girl. Of course he can do infinity, right? Whereas, like, I'm 32 years old, been training for a long time. I can't do that. But it'd be like the delta between people can be so vast and massive. It's baffling. So you look at somebody like Charlie, Mike's roommate, former roommate, and somebody who is new to training, and it's like, even that is going to be a huge discrepancy where like the Charlie's total volume might be massively exceeding the newbie, but he might only be doing a very few number of sets per effort at the same time, whereas the newbie might be doing a lot of sets. You know what I mean? So it's like, when you really do break it down numerically, it can be very surprising, I guess.
Yep. We have not done any statistical analysis on it. We have a big project at RP that will eventually do statistical analysis on it.
Cody was trying to do that, but they ended up not. That's not that. I guess that's not where it ended up going. Was that correct?
Yes.
I think they were trying to do that, and then it just went a different route due to internal. I don't want to say.
Yeah, it's just tough to do a study like that. We will be doing studies like that through RP, but that is all James and I can say for now.
Ooh, mysterious.
Yeah. All right, another question from Daniel. Do you know how much of the benefits of EPA and DHA omega-3s versus ALA omega-3s are properly understood, but not just conjectural? From my reading, it seems salmon and a few other fishes are way more dense than the former 2. Salmon is basically the source for these longer chain omega-3s. It was more convenient for me to eat lots of salmon once every few days because of work and occasional all-you-can-eat sushi games. I was hoping that this kind of regularity in dosing was more or less the equivalent in terms of benefits. Smaller, normal person-sized daily dosages. EPA and DHA seem to be the predominant ones that we lack, / the healthy ones, / whatever. So they're the ones that we're trying to go after. And yeah, fatty fish, especially stuff that is caught out of the oceans and lakes and is not farm raised is the fucking place to get that shit. I believe you live somewhere near a coast. You probably eat sushi that comes from the ocean, and that's the fucking best way to get it. So I think you're doing well.
Solid.
Yeah. All right, and I'd like to join in with praise of Dr. Miller. You know what? Let me copy this.
He's been getting, let me tell you, we get more positive reviews of Dr. Miller's lecture series than anything else. I mean, the people who like him compared to the people who like us, I mean, he just like shits all over us.
Man, fuck Dr. Miller. I ain't even heard of that motherfucker. I don't know who the fuck is Dr. Miller. Yo, Dr. Mike and Dr. James. It's the only doctors you need to have coming out your fucking mouth.
We're the fucking plebes over here, and Dr. Miller is what's the other one? Fuck, I forgot. Plebeians and I can't remember.
There's another one? I only know plebes, man.
Plebes is the lower ranking, and then there's the
I don't know the higher ranking one.
There's a higher ranking one. I can't remember what it is. Mel.
Huh?
What's the opposite of a plebeian?
Huh?
What's the opposite of a plebeian?
I don't remember. Some kind of royalty. I don't remember.
You don't remember? Yeah, we were trying to think of the word. Mel doesn't remember either. That's killing me. Now I gotta figure it out. Fuck. We can move on.
All right.
Noble.
I'm gonna send
Patrician.
What?
Patrician, which I believe the root word relates to patriarchal, if I'm not mistaken.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Patrician and plebeian.
Damn, I didn't. You know, obviously there was going to have to be a diminutive and superlative form, but I didn't know that was the case. All right, fuck. Let me navigate back to these docs. I'd like to join in with the praise of Dr. Miller. I never had lectures anywhere near that good or engaging when I was at uni. His biomechanics course directed me down a really nice rabbit hole of continuing my own biomechanics education with my head in a couple of textbooks for the last little while, and that might not have happened had Dr. Miller's lecture not been so good. I knew from the outset that RP Plus would teach me stuff, but I didn't appreciate how well it would empower me to keep learning. The ride back the Dunning-Kruger curve is lots of fun. Totally.
Yeah, he's the man, and I haven't actually spoken with him about this, but Sonia, Gabby, and I are trying to get CEUs set up for RP Plus, and his particular course is on my radar.
Yeah, holy shit, dude, he's the fucking man.
Yeah.
All right, David Baker with 2 Ks. Here's 1 K short of something real unfortunate in his name.
Ooh.
Tell you that. Hey, Docs. Sadly, I don't have a special name, although you did roast me on the Sports Scientist podcast for my Instagram name.
What was it? You know who this was?
I don't know, but I remember making fun of somebody with some kind of nickname.
Damn it.
But I do have an interesting question. You know what? David, you're being awfully presumptuous. We're going to find out if your question's interesting. All you can do is say you have a question.
Mike, I'm going to get a refill, but I'm not ignoring.
Okay. Can you hear?
I can hear. Yeah, it's on speaker.
Can you hear? For the last 1.5 to 2 years, I couldn't understand why I'd always rebound out of a cut. That it probably had something to do with super high body fat at that point. My body just didn't want me to be lean. When I started reading Mini Cut Manual today, I saw my problem. All my cuts have been mini cuts with the relaxation. I don't know what that is. Low volume phase afterwards, as you explained in the beginning. Yep, that's not where mini cuts are for. Now my question. Yeah, they're actually mini cuts are intention rebounds, and you were doing them right. I rebounded up to 15%, currently hanging there for the rest of the vacation. After the vacation, the first plan was to start a long bulk high volume phases, but now that I'm at 50%, I decided to put a cut like before. I think this will make the high volume phase afterwards more effective. The plan was a short mini cut of 5 to 6 weeks with a big volume phase followed after that. The Mini Cut Manual had me question this. Would it be better to do a regular cut? Yes, it would. The reason I wouldn't want to do that is that it will extend my phase without high volume training gaining even further. I'm not sure. I'm not that advanced. I want to maximize my time at a caloric surplus. Remember, you're going to maximize your time at a caloric surplus by getting leaner to begin with and slowly coming up instead of mini cutting and getting only to 12% or 13% and then only having a small time in the surplus. A normal cutting phase would extend my non-gaining phase for even longer. I think it's worth it when you're up at 15%. Now, you can You don't have to get that lean, but if you want to get lean again for 50%, you might as well go Freedom Cup. I would love to hear some advice. Is this the place for a mini cut, or is this regular cut more desired? The goal is to gain as much muscle as I can in the coming 4 to 5 years. I don't care about being lean all the time. I just want to get big, LOL. But I see the advantage of muscle gain for not being too fat all the time. Yeah, if you don't really care about body fat too much, you can do a mini cut and then get up to like 17, 18% and then long cut your way down. Or you could long cut now. It's going to have to be long cuts in the process either way. Hope to get some responses to this long story. Thanks in advance. Keep up the amazing work. I really love RP Plus, especially the lectures. Jason Miller is an amazing lecturer.
I'm telling you.
Tired of hearing about this motherfucker. Jason Miller. I ain't never heard of anybody named Jason Miller. Nobody that by that name works at RP. So
I was listening in, so I'm looking at it. He rebounded up to 15%, and that's where he's at now? Or is that where
so he's basically at 15%. He wants to get as big as possible. He doesn't care a ton about being lean. So should he do a mini cut or should he do a full long cut? I said full long cut is unavoidable because even if he does a mini cut now, when he gets to 17, 18% on a long mass phase, he's going to have to do a long cut anyway to get down. So I think you can't. Mini cuts are delay tactics that extend the duration of a bulking phase, but they're not infinitely utilizable, as you remember from the mini cut manual, by the way.
Absolutely.
So being that that's the case, I think it's really worth either a long cut now or a long cut later. And I would say while you're not fat, still do a long cut now.
I mostly agree with what Mike's saying. The only thing I would add, and this is a very small contributor to my answer, is that you could, if you don't care about being big, I mean, I've had productive mass phases starting at 15%. Do I recommend doing that? No. But is it doable? And can you still have productive training and massing phases? Yes, absolutely. You just get more fat in the process, which just means more cutting time later. So it kind of depends.
You can't walk away from the cutting time.
Yeah. If you like, for me, I can't hold. I don't want to give a personal example, but just food for thought. I cannot hold sub 10% as like a consistent way to live. I cannot do it. It's not possible. I hang out most of the year between 15 and 20%, and that is like my comfortable zone. If I want to go below that, I have to do hard dieting. Does that mean, though, that I can't still gain muscle from time to time if I'm hovering around 15%? No. And that's an easier thing for me to maintain. So I might go up to 20%, knowing that it's an unfavorable trade-off, but also knowing that to get down to 10% is a real struggle for me. So that's just an example of a mindset that you might adopt if being super lean is not your jam, especially if it's very difficult for you to do so. Either way, I would say probably start on the leaner side as much as you can tolerate and then work your way up.
Yep. Very good. Toby Kurz. Hey guys, I would be very interested in hearing your opinion on the carnivore diet that for whatever reason recently seems to be kind of trendy in certain circles that see Børge Fagerli as their go-to guy / guru. Personally, I'm very skeptical about the concept, both in terms of the physiological validity of it as well as the pseudo-evolutionary rationale behind it. Seems very made up and cherry-picked to support someone's personal agenda, which immediately rings all critical thinking alarm bells. However, it would be interesting in hearing your take on it from an evidence-based perspective. Maybe there's something to it and something that can be learned. Thank you. Well, I know Børge personally, and I know that Børge loves his veggies and loves berries and all this other kind of shit, which is clearly not on the fucking carnivore diet. So as far as I know, I might be wrong. Børge does not endorse the carnivore diet outright. He thinks that maybe during the winter time, you could eat a bit more meat and less plant foods, and the other way around in the summertime. But I don't think he sees this as a sustainable diet for the long term. Being that he, and I could probably lump James into this, myself included, do not see the carnivore diet as being sustainable long term, the next question is, why are you doing an unsustainable fad diet? I don't know.
Why are you doing a fad diet, period?
Exactly. So how can we make the carnivore diet better? What's wrong with the carnivore diet? Well, it's incredibly restrictive and probably too high in saturated fat, adequate in protein, not high enough in carbohydrate, definitely not high enough in vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, and fiber. Where do we get those things? Well, from veggies, fruits, whole grains, in that order. Where do we get healthy fats? From fatty fish, from a variety of omega-3 sources, and of course, nuts, nut butters, olive oil, canola oil, avocado, so on and so forth. Hey, guess what we just built? The RP diet. That's fucking weird. So the carnivore diet, let me tell you the kind of people that is, between our little group of RP plus folks here, let me tell you the kind of people that like the carnivore diet. Fuckstick bro cocksuckers that want to say cool shit to make themselves feel the fuck carnivore diet, brother. These are the kind of people that have fucking lions in their profile pictures on Facebook. Fuck you. You ain't no motherfucking lion. If you're a lion, I'm gonna be wrist locking a lion pretty soon. You come through and roll. This is like the Ed Hardy T-shirt of diets.
Okay, so let's just say you buy into kind of the ancestral evolutionary diet stuff, which I'm not suggesting you should, but let's just say that you do. Great. Why not just do paleo? Paleo is all the same idealism with a lot more benefit, right?
Totally.
It's like you can do the paleo thing. You can have basically all the meat you want. Throw in some nuts and some fruits and limited carbohydrate sources, and you're golden. Nothing wrong with that. Again, I'm not advocating for that, but I'm just saying like the carnivore diet is an example of like a thoughtless fad. Yep. Whereas like I kind of feel the same way about paleo, but maybe has more merit or more applicability to the modern person who is not as constrained. So
I'll tell you what I don't even think is an analogy. I think it's a direct relationship. The carnivore diet is to the vegan diet what the alt-right is to social justice warriors. And I literally mean that it's the same people doing this stuff.
Yes.
Like vegans were like, meat's murder and you're fucking killing the planet. And they had a lot of good points, and they had a lot of points that were just completely overrated and just totally fucking made up. Okay. So then what do people come back with? The carnivore diet. It's fucking meat, bro, just meat. It's like, SJWs went off the fucking deep end a bit. So then we got the alt-right being like fucking fascism's kind of sweet. Well, both of them are fucking wrong. It turns out, not being a centrist and being in the middle, but being rational about things is probably a good way to go.
I just had a huge epiphany. We came at this at the wrong angle entirely. We were just dead wrong. You know what this is really about? Carnivore supplements.
I hate. That was a terrible thing.
You only eat those chocolate beef bars. That's it.
So guys, here's the story. We were in London for work, myself and James and Mel. And James had always very, very on the money with travel and nutrition. Is actually him and Mel are very good at this sort of thing. And he brought a shitload of protein bars with him. And he ate most of them by the time he got to London to buy more. It's a long flight and airport stuff. And then James was like, "Hey, Mike, I got this carnivore bar. You should try it." We're like in our hotel Airbnb in London. I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "It's got a real interesting taste." And I'm like, "Okay." Because people say it tastes interesting. That's just definitely not good.
Not a good start.
So I bite into it. It's the carnivore brand protein, which is like beef protein. James has a mild obsession with beef in general. James, you should be in the carnivore diet. You love beef. So
I'll zip it until you're done. Sorry.
The bar tasted, so it was chocolate flavored, right? But it's beef protein. It tasted like chocolate. It tasted like if you eat a Hershey's Kiss after someone punched you in the mouth and you've bled on your teeth. Like it's an off taste of congealed blood with chocolate. And I was like, get this the fuck away from me.
Dude, I don't know if it's just like a nervous response or what, but when I bit into it, like I just couldn't help but laugh. And I don't laugh when I'm nervous or anxious or anything, but it was just like such a hilarious cacophony of taste in my mouth where it's like,
that'd be a good advertisement. Our bars are hilarious.
Yeah, it's like you're like, oh, chocolate, and then it's like, bam, steak, and you're like, huh? What? Blood?
It's like a rare steak too.
Yeah, rare steak, and you're like, well, this is like chocolate beef. It was so
weird.
Yeah.
I wonder, that's a good way to, let's join some Facebook carnivore diet groups and troll them. Be like, so I got this carnivore bar.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Exactly.
And make like you're like foreign guy where you're like, I am having carnivore bar on this diet. Yes. And they're like, no, it's got sugar in it. It's not made of meat. You can't have it. Like, but it is called carnivore. Yes, I can have. Yes. And they're like, no, you can't have it. Like, yes, I will have.
How much bar UM has? This bar is dildos.
Week 3 update. I am tired of eating carnivore bar only. I am have meat now. And they're like, oh my god. and then they'd be sweet to troll them. Be like, come in and be like, hey guys, actually I can speak the English language quite well. I've been fucking with you guys. That's the first thing I've been fucking with you. The second thing is, you motherfuckers making fun of me for just eating carnivore bars. Your diet is just as arbitrary and probably even worse for you. Go fuck yourself.
Go fuck yourself. And I'm a show for Muscle Meds. I got paid for all this. What?
Sponsorship. You know what, though, guys? Just a quick heads up. There's going to be people that actually do the carnivore diet and have good blood work and are fine, and their sport performance is okay. They eat a lot of protein. Beef has a lot of good health benefits. It makes you nice and strong. It's not a long-term sustainable diet, and it's fucking arduous. You could do a fish diet and get the same fucking thing. Do not limit yourself to one ingredient, even if in the short term it works. Okay, it'll work just fine. There's a difference between work and like radically elevated nutritional platform. So I mean, just fucking think of going out to eat. What the fuck are you gonna do? They're like, well, there's no beef here at this restaurant. There's chicken, fish, turkey. You're like, nope, we got to leave. What?
Yeah, especially if you use like religious criteria of what meat is. You're like, well, I can't have fish. Fuck, that's not meat.
Yep.
Dang.
Good
that
question.
was actually one of the sweet parts of being Catholic. On Fridays, you go out to the fish fry, or you'd get like 10 fillets of fish from McDonald's.
You're not selling it, James.
Oh my God, I used to love that.
You're like, hey, Catholicism, we have child rape. Like, nah, it's not going well. Fillet of fish, like, okay, Catholicism's done.
Like, I'm only hanging on by a thread, and that thread is a fillet of fish, right? Like,
yeah, for real. One huge benefit of Catholicism, I certainly hope I don't get in trouble with this, is a lot of girls that are ex-Catholics are sex freaks when they're older.
Oh, that's true. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Because, well,
you cannot has.
Well, we'll just save that one for the podcast.
Let's save it for the podcast. Yeah. So Marcos Rodriguez questions. Stephen Gruber. Apparently a question directed exclusively to me.
You son of a
Mike,
bitch.
Do you set volume targets for workouts beyond just X sets with Y weight? For example, for a given exercise, say you plan on hitting 15, 13, 11, 9, 7, 55 reps total, but say you only got 14, 11, 9, 7, 8, 49 reps. Would you call it done because you got your 5 sets of that weight? Would you add a 6th set to get extra volume? Would you decrease the weight to get more reps? It depends on the situation. I know each exercise that I'm doing, if it's a progression of just sets with, whatever RIR per set, then I don't care about total reps. Sometimes I shoot for total reps, and then I don't even count how many fucking reps I get per set. I just hit the total reps. Usually it's RIR, almost always.
Yeah, those are also just different programming styles that you can adopt as well.
They have their costs and their benefits.
Not that I have anything to do with this question.
No, well, please. Oh my God, James, look who's back.
I know. He posted a monster one too.
Hola, amigo. Thanks for answering my questions. I've got some new ones. He says, while smoking a cigar made out of paper that was made from barrels of aged wine.
Dude, that's so sweet. And he used the Spanish character in the Hola Amigos, the upside down exclamation mark. I was like, dude, you're the man. This is sweet.
Yep. He prefers to speak Spanish, but speaks 18 languages fluently and 50 languages functionally.
Do you think
what languages don't interest him?
Do you think he has Sofia Vergara on his contacts list?
James, let me tell you where she's on the C list.
Oh, damn! Who's on the
Sofia?
At that point,
yeah, right. He's like Sofia. Hello. Yes, I have an engagement in Milan. I have to fly from Argentina. Will you? Actually, Sofia, hold on. I'm getting a call from another supermodel. Hold, please. And then he just hangs up on her, even though he told her to hold. And he's like, "Yes, Esperanza. Great. I'll see you in Milan." Click. And Sofia's like, 2 hours later, she's like, "Nope. Sorry, bitch."
Like, damn,
Fuck
not
with
getting that
mega
call
oil
back.
magnate. Yeah, when you're a trillionaire, you know what I'm saying? Life is
Too
tough.
good. Too good.
Number 1, plastic versus crystal food containers. I'm going to start meal prepping and I need to buy some Tupperwares to take with me. Is plastic okay or should I go with crystal? I've heard that plastic might migrate particles to food, but I'm not sure implications might be as there concerns. Almost certainly not a concern. Most of the control studies that I've seen on plastics and various PCBs and things like that go absolutely nowhere. This is one of those like hippie drivel type things. I haven't read up on the issue in a little while, several years, but what I saw was pretty convincing evidence this is all fucking garbage. James?
Yeah, so the only reason why I know anything about this is not due to my own personal effort, but we interviewed a candidate at Temple when Mike and I were working there who had expertise in this area. So I can just regurgitate what she said. Essentially was this: the exposure level that you get of BPA from plastics using water bottles and plastic food containers is so minimal that it's not worth considering, like Mike already suggested. The worst exposure rates and the ones that are actually most significant are those that you get when you're actually in a hospital, because everything is plastic and you have plastic tubing going in and out of your body and all that other stuff. So there are cases where BPA and some other chemicals found from plastics can actually inhibit your cardiac function. And there are slides of comparisons of cardiac tissue, and you can see it actually happening. And it's actually really fucking cool and trippy to watch. But these are levels that are like astronomically high of exposure. Nothing that you could possibly reasonably get from using plastic containers. So plastic containers are fine outside of personal preference.
Thank you. Very, very insightful, James. I remember when I got umbilical hernia surgery and they put me out, put a plastic tube down me, of course. I had Chinese food as soon as I got out of that surgery. And the egg rolls tasted like industrial plastic. Ew. And I was like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever fucking, because it's still plastic taste.
Yeah.
Super fucking weird. Yeah.
What
kind of cool.
Horrible way to ruin a good Chinese food night.
I mean, yeah, that was rather unforgivable. Deloads for hypertrophy. Number 2 from Agustin Valdez. Are these parameters correct? Deloads for hypertrophy. Volume, maintenance volume. Intensity of load, same as week 1, 80%-ish 10 RM. Intensity of effort, half the reps of week 1. Duration, 1 week. Yep, sounds good, James.
Yeah, don't get too caught up on the 80% of X, Y, or Z RM, but, roughly near or slightly below of what you did of week 1 is a great, easy starting point. I think sometimes they get too caught up in the numbers. Those numbers are difficult across different goals. You said hypertrophy, and that's fine. But like
populations too.
If you use that same approach for like maximal strength, you get some different results.
Also, like for different populations, James, like my deload squat weights, like when Charlie, my training partner, he's an 800 pound squatter. When he does hypertrophy work, his deload squat weight is 225 pounds. His week 1 hypertrophy squat weight is 600 pounds. Like he's not doing anywhere close to week 1 intensities at his deload week because he's so fucking strong. For most people, that's the average, and it's going to work just fine.
Absolutely.
3, intensity of load progression through a hypertrophy mesocycle. I want to understand how to properly progress load through a basic hypertrophy mesocycle. Made some calculations by MPT. Reverse engineering. We actually intentionally mislabeled the MPT, and the real formulas are secret. So
wouldn't that be fucked up? Wouldn't that be so fucked up?
So fucked up. It would also be easy, but super fucked up. We should do that. April Fools. Here's all the calculations.
Yeah. So what I would say is like these are like very generalizable guidelines.
An example of what to do correctly.
Yes. It's not set in stone, especially for hypertrophy, where the intensity progression is really kind of not a big important factor compared to the volume progression. You could get a very similar, almost identical progress from a modified version of this, maybe not exactly this. But yes, this is very generalizable to a large group of people. Some people, especially like if they're very, very fast twitch, might not be able to do that because as soon as they hit the really, really heavy set on week 4, they're just done, right? So just keep that in mind. There are some individualization considerations, but as a general progress, yes, this is pretty reasonable.
Yeah. The logic behind this progression, Our logic on the templates was when you go from week 1 to week 1 is a bunch of very strange new exercises potentially. So you want to make sure that week 1 to week 2, there's going to be a lot of adaptation. And because of the neurological adaptations, your strength can increase quite rapidly from week 1 to week 2 on the new exercises. So though that way that gives you a 5% boost to continue to overload adequately. And then week 3 is just a little bit of a boost. And then week 4. So week 3 is really 92.5. And then week 4 is 95. And those like, 95% of 10RM, that's like, sets of 8 to 12, depending on fatigue.
Oh, sorry.
So these are just hypertrophy range or weights. And the thing is, that's like for first exercises. And then as the second ones go down and lower, the actual relative percentages of 1RM if you're fresh, are way lower. So you end up having a spectrum of loading ranges because you do multiple exercises. And it all works out to being anywhere between, the 6RM zone, in some cases, for some people, all the way to the 20RM zone, which is the most productive way to train for hypertrophy. And with the male physique template, we chose to be a little bit conservative, clump towards the middle, because we don't want to, if you go for extremes, you lose a lot of the population. Remember, the male physique templates, I'm going to say something really interesting right now. A lot of you in RP Plus are going to be able to modify those templates pretty heavily to your individual circumstances, or just make templates of your own. Because you guys are super fucking sharp. The male physique templates are designed for people who are literally like, I don't want to fucking think about the shit. I'm just going to fucking train. This template's going to tell me what to do. You guys can usually do a better job of the template, especially once you have it, once you know it. You can modify it to be much more customized to you. So there's not a ton of magic in the progression. I just explained it. If you want to alter something that you think is better, I think you should go for it. James?
Yes, and I there's something that I just picked up on that I want to make clear. Using the 10RM is something that we did because it's generalizable enough to be put into template form. When you were doing this on your own, a better relative scoring would be the set and rep goal of the actual session that you're doing. So hear me out on this. Instead of doing 10RM, 95%, you realistically should be doing like maybe 90% of your 4x10 or something like that. Because 95% of your 10RM almost guarantees that the first set will be 10 and then the subsequent sets will not be 10 for most people, right? Yeah. So keep that in mind. So if it's a 10 rep max, that only factors in a 1 set part of the equation. Usually, when most people who are training for hypertrophy, and that's why you'd be using the male physique template in the first place, you are going to be doing multiple sets, probably 4 to 5 per workload, right? And possibly even like upwards of 10 total with multiple workloads. So that being said, you would probably want to use a slightly different scaling in your own programs. For example, instead of using 95% of 10 rep max, you might choose to use 87.5% of 5x10, something like that. That's just the error to make.
Yep. And that's, of course, like, first exercise, you can do 95% of 10RM because you want reps as low as 6 in some of your sets, because that's your heavy exercise, the first one. Your second exercise can be lighter and do another, a slightly lighter range, and so on and so forth. So there should be some spectrum within each workout. Just make sure it's reasonable spectrum. You don't want to be doing sets of 3 and calling it hypertrophy, or sets of 45 and calling it hypertrophy.
Exactly.
Micro-loading. Please insert sexual joke here, Dr. Mike. I don't even know which sexual joke is there with micro-loading.
Got it. Ready? Penis? Watch my screen.
Oh, wait, hold up. No, hold up. I haven't seen your screen. Go ahead. I love it. Can you feel it?
Is it in yet?
Feel what? Yeah.
It's in your butt.
If I had a micro penis, I would take.
It's like a novel. It's like an OJ novel. If I did it, if I had a micro penis.
I can't believe you wrote that book. If there was like an interruption, shut up thing, that would be perfect for when he started writing that book. If I had a shut up. So if I had a micro penis, I would take pictures of it and spread those pictures to the window underneath my home, like litter, and watch people pick it up, look at it, be disgusted, and I would masturbate to their disgust with my tweezers.
Oh, man.
Pop that one, Dr. Hoffman.
That's very masochistic of you. Very good.
I could just see Nick Shaw like reviewing the tape, hearing that, and being like, all right, defend this statement as representing our company well. I'd be like,
I had a couple. I had a funny interaction with Nick today. I'll tell you about it afterwards.
Okay, please do. I was going to say don't ghost Nick on here. All right. All right, microloading. Well, you got your sexual joke.
There it is.
Yeah, Augustine, you definitely got that one. So I train at my home gym, and I was thinking of buying 0.25 kilogram plates. Fuck you, non-metric American, with your pounds and shit. I know what I like.
Oh, that's right. Are we still on? That's right. Yep. We got to keep it going.
You know, in your uranium dirigible, I'm sure it's fun to say things like that. To be able to, he has a uranium dirigible, like it's a Goodyear blimp made of uranium, and someone's like, but it's so heavy. Why? He's like, so it can be overpowered and still float. Oh, how absurd! I love it. And they're like, but it's $1,000 a second to keep it afloat. He's like, and then he blows smoke in their faces, like $1,000 of what? I don't even notice these things.
You have cancer now.
Because of you been on the uranium blimp, mostly. It's not from the cigarette smoke, believe it or not.
I was thinking you can just use your incremental singularity plates at this point, at whatever kilogram increment that you want. You want 0.1, throw it on there. We know you got that money.
Yeah. You got your own fucking plate company. All right. To be able to progress exercises like lateral raises or bicep curls, do you think this could be useful? Yes. Yeah. How would you implement such progressions? In the same exact way you implement anything else. Every week you add one of them shits on, or every other week, and you try to maintain the reps. Another thing about progressing laterals, you could just add reps throughout the week. Although I think there's nothing wrong with the 0.25 kilogram plates. I will tell you this. If they're magnetic, make sure they're on maybe the inside of the dumbbell, or make sure they're on stapled, or you're not swinging. I have shot those plates at people doing lateral raises before. You don't want that fucking... Yes, I have. Not my most fun moment.
Were you like, quick, give it back?
Hey, sorry to hit you in the face, but seriously, I'm mid-set.
Can you put it on for me? Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hold my camera and record this for me?
Any input, James, on the...
No, yeah, it's the same progression. It's just on a smaller intensity scale at that point. But they're very useful, absolutely. If I had them, I would use them.
Sweet. Yep, agreed. Muchas gracias, Agustin says, as his uranium blimp turns around and slowly crosses the Atlantic, letting out a thermonuclear fart every now and again when its engines combust.
Do you think he crosses into like Chinese airspace, and instead of sending him like a cease immediately message, they're just like, oh yeah, he's fine, let him in?
That's Agustin Valdez. We do not mess with him. For some reason, they also have a Hispanic accent. Can you imagine? There's like an environmental lawyer on his uranium blimp, and she's like doing a hit piece article on him, and he has her on there to interview him, and she's like, this is a ridiculous contraption. What fuel source does it run on? He's like, a combination of nuclear power and coal. And she's like, coal? Why? He's like, for the absurdity, my love. And of course, as soon as the interview's over, my boy's railing that bitch because she came up there. She was like, I hate this man. And after she saw his gold-plated suit and his fucking, you know what I'm saying, he's probably eating gold M&Ms and throwing away parts of them because, she's like, I need to have it. I need the real Argentinian trillionaire.
It is fueled by your disgust.
Your, how you say, disgust, my love, mi amore. I think that was a bit Italian, but whatever, fucking same shit.
Oh my God, too good.
Love it. I want to meet Agustin Valdez in real life. Except not on the uranium ship, so it's bad for health.
I think it's just Tiago's online persona. That's his avatar.
Fucking Tiago. All right. Julian Paras. Or actually, this guy's from Australia. Paris. Oi.
Paris.
Howdy. All again. Last week, I was surprised Mike said my name correctly. Fuck, I don't remember how I said it. No one in Australia has a clue as how I say it due to there not being many Spaniards. Oh, so it is Paras.
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 Or if they're Brazilians or Portuguese, Pajas.
Pajaestre. So recently picked up a pair of weightlifting shoes. Good idea. And amazed by the extra amount of depth I can get in the squat without splitting my Achilles. Totally. Yep. Although with the new ROM, I found that I have butt wink. When going deeper into a squat, I tend to do high bar with relatively close stance, although stance didn't seem to make much of a difference. I'd heard from Jeff Nippard's videos and reading the topic that there are two camps of people. People that believe this There's flexibility. The people that believe it's determined by skeletal structure. I think it's a combination of both. It just depends on which one it is for you. James?
Well, I think so, Mike. I don't even care about that so much. The real question is, do we have to establish that is butt wink bad? And I would argue, no, it's not. Right?
Yeah, unless it really rounds the shit out of your lower back, it's not bad.
If
that's just like a problem.
If you can maintain at least a neutral spine, which even during butt wink most people can, you're good to go. We would prefer an arched back, but there are flexibility limitations that some people will simply never be able to squat full depth, high bar, arched back without a little bit of butt wink. That's just that, and that could be structural, anthropometric reasons, right? That just won't happen. So to me, as long as they're not doing, as Dr. Quinn, medicine man, says, poop dog, as long as they're not doing the poop dog, you're golden. Don't overthink it at that point. Preferably arch back, in my opinion. I would say at minimum neutral spine, and then certainly not posterior pelvic tilt.
Yep. Julian, I got a tip for you. You're saying you want to go deeper, but you want to hit legal depth, but you like the extra stretch for the quads. Instead of squatting like this, where you squat back, right, but you're sitting back and your shins are mostly upright, when you break at your hips, bend your knees a lot and let them go forward, so you're squatting more like that. That'll keep your upper body more upright. It'll prevent butt wink largely or reduce it considerably, and it'll let you fuck your quads up. Squat into your knees and into your quads once you break at your hips instead of super far back, and I think it'll kill two birds with one stone.
Absolutely. Don't. That's one of those paralysis by analysis things where you see something and it looks kind of weird, and you're like, "Oh, I can't do this anymore." Right? It's like, no, you're fine. Just keep going.
Yeah. God damn, Skleebs wrote us a fucking novel.
I know. Skleebs like comes and goes, and all of a sudden, blammo.
Yeah. Philip Skleba says, "Hey, Jen, sorry about the long one. I'll try to post more regularly instead of letting the questions accumulate. For hypertrophy training, number 1, at what point does functional overreaching occur? I was under the impression that it was once local MRV has been exceeded, rep performance across the set significantly drops. In this example, are you already overreached prior to the session where performance noticeably drops? Probably.
You could be the overreaching is a bit of a spectrum. It's not like a single point kind of thing. It's a spectrum. So there's kind of the non-functional overreaching period is kind of like a I don't know how to say this, a range maybe of scores. Yeah. And then overreaching is more clear and concise, where it's like, okay, you've hit a point of no return. Now you're in overreaching. Not functional overreaching is kind of more of a spectrum of scores.
Yeah. Also, like, overreaching requires a diagnosis. How do you know you're overreached? You underperformed. So you can't tell if you overreached earlier until you do this week. And if you manage to hit it and you do perform and overload again, then I guess you weren't overreached. So it's one of those kind of like quantum mechanics sort of puzzles where trying to figure out what's going on contributes to the problem.
So like you could also be in a situation where you were doing a workout that was maybe like on a Wednesday, and from Monday and Tuesday you were not overreached, but once you did that Tuesday workout, that puts you into overreaching systemically but not locally, right? Yep. And so then it's like, well, what is it at that point? Well, I don't know. We don't know yet. It's hard to say.
Also in this example, should you persist with the session and continue to hit your volume target for the overreach body part? I think in most cases you can. You just can't do that over multiple weeks, right? So I think you can hit it again hard if it's like the next week is deload. Unless you risk injury or like severe like malfunction. Like, I think you can certainly put in the volume, and you might have to drop the weight to make that happen. I think for hypertrophy, that's fine. So you definitely don't have to be like, oh, I'm overreached, stop. Like, if it's next week, I think you can survive a week of overreaching in almost every case and possibly even benefit from it. You just don't want to do it like 2 weeks in a row.
There's actually an infographic in the recovery book about exactly that, about how much time you can spend in overreaching for the various fitness characteristics that you're doing.
Yep. If the next scheduled training session did not include said overreaching body part, could it be a good idea to perform the next session as scheduled and then move on to the deload? For example, triceps is overreached, and the next session body parts scheduled to train are quads, hams, side delts, and biceps. Can't really say that I understand the question.
So I think he's saying
I think it's totally fine to train those other things.
I think he's basically saying, like, if you're experiencing local overreaching without systemic overreaching, should you keep going?
Yeah, fuck yeah, absolutely. Just don't keep fucking your triceps up.
Yeah, I agree largely. It's
Yeah.
there is something like, so, for bodybuilding, there's a lot more kind of just like old school Iron Brotherhood, like just shut up and fucking do it, brother.
Yeah.
When you get into more sports specific considerations, you can make a case and say maybe not, because there's a variety of like performance characteristics that might go over the edge at that point when they're in a golden zone at the moment. So, but for bodybuilding, a lot of it is kind of like, and just for health and fitness for that matter, is kind of like, yeah, if you can, keep going, and if you get to a point where you can't, then you can't, and then you have to deload, and that's it.
Yep. No, that's pretty good. Number 2, for deloading from hypertrophy mesocycle, does it matter how the 50% reduction in volume occurs? For example, could you perform 3 sets of 6 at RAR 6 or 2 sets of 9 at RAR 3? It does matter. It doesn't matter how you split your reps and sets. I think it really does matter about RAR. I think the deload should include only low RARs, because a high RAR, even with a low volume, is psychologically fatiguing, and possibly fatiguing at a tissue level as well, in a way that the same RAR is simply not. So, the concept of effective reps, basically close to failure training, you want to flip the script on that completely and stay the fuck out of that zone for the deload. James?
Just to be very clear, when you say high RAR, you mean low reps in reserve.
Low RAR, sorry. So, like, yeah, basically be like, dude, I could technically deload if I just did one all-out set of squats to failure, like set of 6. Don't do that. That's a bad idea.
Exactly.
For a couple of reasons. One of which is because you're so fucked up from the mesocycle before, you could get hurt doing that. The other one is close to failure training has an exponential relationship to fatigue. It's the opposite of what we want. So more submaximal sets is better than fewer sets close to max if the volume's the same.
Completely agree.
Considering the changes in load contribute to volume, do the 90% and 50% of intensity deload accumulation deload recommendations factor in independently? Of the 50% volume reduction, am I overthinking the shit out of this? You're not overthinking it. I think there's actually a difference between how we do it in the templates and how we described it in theory. In the templates, it actually ends up being like a 25% volume reduction. In the recommendations, it's a 50%. It's not even purposeful to get into the debate. We have other webinars where we've done this before. It's not even purposeful to get into the debate between those two strategies. What is important is you reduce your intensity to some extent, reduce your volume to a considerable extent. The debate between how much and how far is really a debate that gets completely encapsulated in a range of situations and training ages and genetics. So some people can do less, some people can do more, some people can do way less, some people way more. So if we said, well, it should be 25% or it should be 50 or it should be 40, we're just talking about different people at that point and not even different general strategies. So if you cut your intensity to 90% and you cut your volume by at least about half, if that works, great. If it's too much, do less. James?
Yeah, I think there's contextual situations too. I think for somebody who is more of like a strength power athlete, for example, like a weightlifter or power lifter, you might see more variability in the intensity because that is going to be a major contributing factor to the fatigue. And also, on the other hand of the argument, going too low, you also will start to see decreases in like the specificity of technique for certain movements. So I think it's one of those things that Mike already said. It's kind of, it depends on the athlete, depends on the context, but for the most part, you can't really fuck it up too bad as long as you reduce the volume and you modulate the intensity a little bit. After that, you're golden, and then the rest is sport-specific context.
Yeah. I've also heard it said that you can use 1/3 of MRV as your deload volume, or just to use your MVs, i.e. the training volume you would in a resensitization phase. Given that they're estimated numbers, should you just go with the lowest number of all these possibilities, considering it's probably better to err on the side of less? It's definitely better to err on the side of less. That doesn't mean you have to go with the lowest of all these numbers. You can just mid-range the shit out of them, like just average them. Try it, and you'll know if it's enough fatigue reduction or not. That's the way it is. So try in the middle, and if it's a bit much, do less. If it's not enough, just stay in the middle. If it's really not enough, do a little bit more.
And just to clarify, the 1/3 is only been thrown out there because we suspect that is closer to
it's not rule based.
It's not like a different thing. We just think that's probably really close to where maintenance volume is.
Yes, 100%. Number 3, ideally, how would a metabolite mesocycle be deloaded? Would the first half of the week still be a 90% reduction in intensity? I ask because the load is a primary factor that prevents deconditioning during a deload, unless I misinterpreted this in scientific principles. When the weight on a bar is a metabolite phase is going to be at the very lightest, I'm probably just being finicky, but this is something I've wondered about. No, you're not. I think if we were to get real particular, you can use 100% of the load, but cut the volume like a motherfucker. You can even use 110% of the load, cut the volume like a motherfucker.
Yeah, during so I think this is a total clusterfuck situation, but just to illustrate a point. I think if you were using this consideration during a taper, which might last 2 to 3 weeks, this could be a disaster. But in the context of a deload, it's not enough time, so it's probably not a big deal either way. But I think what Mike said is also a good suggestion.
Yeah. Number 4, can going extra hard on volume during the final workout before a deload be a good idea? Like an extra 4 sets per body part, for example, or could this have an impact on MEV in the next mesocycle? I wouldn't so much worry about its impact on MEV in the next mesocycle. What I would worry about is the deload sufficient to heal you from that. Deload is designed to heal you from a slight overreach. If you go way the fuck above and beyond, you're risking acute injury. You're risking some chronic wear and tear that's pointless. And the question is, how much hypertrophy are you really squeezing out at that point, overreaching like crazy? We know that overreaching works to make you bigger, stronger, faster. We're not positive that it works to make you more muscular, although we suspect it might, but it's probably not this huge difference. And if you're really well trained and can use that much of an overreach, because if you're not super well trained, you can't make use of an overreach much anyway. If you're well trained enough to use that overreach, you're well trained enough to accumulate a fuck ton of fatigue from it, and a week might not be enough. So you don't want your week 4 to be a religious experience. You want it to be a super fucking hard workout so that your 5th week or whatever your deload week completely heals you for another mesocycle of training. You don't want to fuck yourself up so bad in the last week, which could, if you overreach hard enough, this is a part of the recovery book, you can actually get sick, like physically ill, like you're more at risk of infection, get a huge cold. You spend a whole deload week recovering from a huge cold, and that's not a wasted deload week, but it sure as hell isn't as good of a deload week as you could have had. So I think this desire to go just these crazy superlative values on an overreach, I just think it's not worth it for most people. James?
Absolutely. And what is important to note here is that more is not necessarily better. And if you really, this is why we have the volume landmarks, because the idea that just doing more will gain you more results is at least partially incorrect, because we know from the dose response literature that there is some optimal amount in terms of absolute gains and rate of gains. There are some top end where we're saying, okay, well, you're training, but you're actually not really making gains, but you're not getting worse. And then above that is actually kind of the shit zone where you're training and possibly getting worse at this point. So that's the idea of training up to an MRV, is not doing above and beyond what's going to make you not going above and beyond productive training. Going above and beyond productive training can actually result in, at least in some ways, deconditioning, believe it or not, because you're going beyond what you can recover from. So now instead of doing a deload and hitting the next mesocycle, you're still overreached in the next week. And now you can't actually have good training anymore. It's a bad idea.
Yeah. Number 5, what is the rationale of staggering body part volume, some more and some less voluminous days, within a microcycle in a hypertrophy phase versus keeping volume relatively balanced throughout each day that a body part is trained? At what point is one's bodybuilding career should volume start to be more staggered, and what are the signs? I think volume should always be staggered to some extent. The reason we stagger volume, there's 2 potential reasons. One is a little bit more technical. I'll get to that one in just a sec. One of the big ones is you may straight up not have enough volume to go around because your MRV is so capped by your recovery ability that you can't possibly do 2 heavy chest days anymore. They just can't both be hard. So one needs to be hard and one needs to be moderate. So you're staggering volume only because you have to fit it into the week. And because you want to train at least one of those sessions hard enough to cause some really good adaptations, kind of a mini overreach. You want at least one of them to be hard, and then the other one has to make up for not being hard. You don't want 2 average sessions. You want a really hard one and one that's easier. because that gives you a little bit of a mini overreach, so to speak, really presents a distinct overload and probably progresses you better than just having 2 sessions that are both meh. The other reason why there should be some asymmetry is for week-to-week recovery enhancement. If both sessions are equally as hard, they work well, but your fatigue always kind of hangs around the same place and never has a chance to fall down. But if you have 2 hard sessions and an easy session, it kind of recharges you every week, even though it gives you a good stimulus, so that actually you can train a little bit harder going forward. It's kind of like a mini deload within a microcycle, like a microcycle level deload. It's the deload to the microcycle where there would be a deload of the mesocycle at a grander scale. James?
Yeah, I was trying to think of additional reasons, but that covers it pretty well. And one of the biggest confounding factors to this approach is training age, where the beginner doesn't need to stagger a whole lot of volume. They can kind of do a lot of consistency across the board.
Yeah.
And as you get increasingly more trained over time, not only the need in terms of fatigue management, but the need for actually generating bigger overloads to perpetuate gains goes up per session as well. So it's a twofold reason for that, for fatigue management and for overload. So Mike nailed it.
And the thing is, you could say, well, why don't you just increase your frequency as an advanced person, and then you can do, there doesn't have to be super distinct overloading sessions. You just overload over time by sheer volume and frequency. Yes, the thing is, advanced people can't survive high frequencies for very long because of joint stuff. So that's why you need bigger session and a smaller session. Another kind of reason for that. Same idea of promoting a good blip of adaptation, but then going back into the safe cave of recovery, so to speak.
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand. It's like it's like trying to describe the relationship between like anabolic and catabolic processes. It's like you can't really describe one without the other. Yeah. Like recovery and promoting overload.
Yep. Number 6, if a female were to speak to me, what would I say?
Yo, girl.
What up?
Yo, girl, if I was Thanos, I'd fucking kill you.
Jesus Christ.
Too harsh? That's a Hoffmani neg.
Hoffmanistan is a
then you actually kill her.
Dark fucking time over there. Number 6, if a female intermediate bodybuilder was getting all the signs of MEV, reasonably challenging, great pumps, next day soreness, and a likely faster twitch or average body part, but was primarily progressing volume via load progressions weekly, 1 to 3% load increases, and with set progressions coming at a rate of 1 more set every other week, what is thought to be going on here? Given reasonable signs of MEV, could this individual benefit from longer mesocycles using slower rates of progression, or is it likely they would benefit from a shorter mesocycle with faster volume progressions? James, can you understand what's being asked?
No, I have to reread it. Sorry, give me a second. Getting almost fine. I think what he's basically suggesting here is that she's demonstrating signs of being kind of more fast twitch in nature, but she's still able to progress pretty consistently on the volume. So he's like, okay, I'm trying to figure out, is she more kind of fast twitch or slow twitch? Where do I go from here? So she can tolerate high load progressions, but she can also seem to tolerate volume progressions as well. That's how I'm reading it.
Okay. I have a really good Chronicles of Riddick answer.
Hit us.
Ready?
Hit us. Yeah.
Don't question it, Vaco. Take it on faith.
I was thinking about the director's cut ending of the 3rd movie where they're like, we found it. We're coming up on the thing, and the movie ends and it shows like the black hole, and it's like transcendence.
So good. I love Vaco. Everything about. He's like, hey, do you want the throne? He's like, fuck that. I'm trying to get immortal.
Right? Look, this is inconsequential. I'm trying to get to the fucking whatever it was, Underworld or.
I would watch like a Vaco Ascends to Supremacy movie any fucking day of the week.
Dude, it makes I'm not mad, but I'm disappointed that they didn't keep going with it.
That was a
really interesting ending to the movie where I was like, now what? And now I'm interested. Now I'm engaged in 2 of the characters. I want to know what happens to Vaco, and I want to know what happens to Riddick.
It's funny, like Chronicles of Riddick, some of the criticism received and the way they did the 3rd movie was like less of the universe and more of just Riddick killing people. And I'm like, fuck you. The universe was great.
No, the universe was the most interesting part. I mean, like I liked Riddick as a character, but he was very prototypical in his role. Like you always kind of knew what he was going to do. Like Whereas all the characters, that's what made the different movies so exciting, was because the lingo, the setting, like the mercs, like
amazing. The mercs are amazing.
So much thought and effort was put into the setting, and that's what I loved about it. It was
amazing.
Great. Yeah.
So to answer the question, don't question it, Baco. If progression is occurring, if volume and intensity progressions are being made, and MEV is being hit, MRV is being hit, feel free to experiment with volume versus intensity progressions and see how it goes. When you say what is thought to be going on here, I have no idea. And the thing is, if progress is being made, we don't really give a shit, man. There's all kinds of different ways that people progress. Just experiment with a bias one way or a bias another. Maybe try less intensity improvement and more volume over the weeks, or the other way around. See what gets the best results, and you're well on your way. We could speculate until we're blue in the face of what's going on here. I actually have no idea. James?
Yeah. The only thing I would add to what Mike said is that when you're working with female clients, you have to, especially from a male perspective, you have to understand that their baseline tolerance to volume and work capacity in general is a lot higher than the typical male. So even a fast twitch female will probably still have what would be kind of a normal volume progression for, like kind of a middle ground male. You know what I mean? So like you have to scale your perspective a little bit.
Yep.
Most females are more fatigue resistant, both acutely and chronically, than males.
Yep.
And you have to kind of scale it a little differently.
Yeah, you got to smash them, basically.
Yeah. You feel me? You got to smash?
Jesus. All right. Number 7. Where are the most logical places to program hamstring isolation and hip hinge movements in relation to compound quad dominant movements like squatting and leg pressing attacks the hamstrings as well? I ask because hamstring work is programmed the day after leg pressing. For example, wouldn't SRA curve or the hamstrings be hit during leg presses bump into the next day of hamstring work? Almost certainly not. Because unless you got a fucked up way of doing leg presses, the hamstring hit should be nothing more than about a warm up. If you're doing leg presses right with your feet low on the platform, then you should be fine. If they do feel a little fatigued, and maybe let's say you hit your leg presses and some squats and your lower back's fatigued, so your stuff like your deadlifts are kind of off. Yeah. So the most logical way, I'll tell you exactly the most logical way. Healed enough to provide overload to the muscle you're working, and with enough time until the next muscle needs to be hit that doesn't interfere with any part of the program. If you can stick it in somewhere intermediate to that, that's great. So what I really like to do is if you're training legs twice a week, for example, you got a quad dominant day with hamstring isolation, like curls, and then glute dominant, lower back, hamstring dominant day with hip hinge hamstring work, deadlifting, things like that, and just a little bit less quad work and more glute work. That's what I like to do. That's a way to do it. Keeps them nice and far apart, keeps you fresh for everything, but there's multiple other ways. Just as long as you're fresh enough to hit it, you're good to go.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. So I would look at it two ways. If you are someone who is very posterior chain dominant, like you have really strong low back, really strong hams, and it takes you a little while to recover from, what you might consider doing is having a lighter hamstring session and possibly only a recovery-only hamstring session using isolation type movements or very, very low impact movements before the big posterior chain day of that week. And that's something that I have done with a lot of success because my posterior chain is really strong on my body. And sometimes I'll just do something really light, like some 45-degree back raises, nothing too crazy, or some hamstring curls beforehand. If I know that, like, for example, if on Monday I did squats and I did some good mornings, my hamstrings, even though I only did like 2 sets of good mornings, will stay sore up until the next deadlifting session. Why? Because they're like my big, strong muscles on my body and they just get fucked up really easy. I'll do a light session when I know I have to have a big pull day the next day to help get me recovered. Conversely, if you don't have that problem, I would go with what Mike said. And as soon as they're ready and recovered and able to be overloaded, boom, hit them again. No big deal.
Yeah.
The isolation movements, you can get away with a lot of kind of interesting things because, like, can you really say that doing a lying hamstring curl prevented you from having a big deadlifting session, even if you tried to make that like an overloading session? That would be a tough argument to make unless you got fucking gigantic.
Right.
You know what I mean? Maybe, but I would say at that point, it's probably more an issue of just being stiff and uncomfortable, not actual performance related decrements.
Yep. Let me type something up real quick and then I'll say it to the world.
Oh my. No, what happened? Oh, apparently we just had an earthquake.
If you fucking didn't notice, that's not a hell of an earthquake, huh?
Did I tell you we had one that woke me up in the middle of the night a couple months ago?
It's crazy, man. Fuck that.
I felt the house whip. It was like whoosh, and I was like, rah, no.
But did the house nay?
Yeah, the house fucking exactly. And I woke up and I was screaming because I was like super vigilant at that point. And Mel was like, "Oh, I'm asleep. It's just a fucking earthquake." I was like, you know,
That doesn't happen in
experienced that
Chicago.
before. No,
Yeah.
it was weird. I didn't notice though. Sorry.
Yeah. So on the note of intersecting SRA curves, so on and so forth, I think multiple studies have now confirmed that you get roughly the same hypertrophy and strength benefit from training Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as you train from Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for example, which would lead us to think, how the fuck is that possible? This is the same body parts, by the way. How the fuck is that possible? Well, it's possible like this. When you train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you have a huge depression in your SRA curve. It takes a while to recover, but because in most cases, the depression is concomitant to the degree of recovery and the degree of adaptation. So the more you depress that curve, the more adaptation you get. So 3 smaller SRA curves is seemingly pretty equivalent to 1 large SRA curve that keeps getting depressed and then has a long time to recover. Another way to think about this more practically from a performance standpoint is you think, man, like my sessions are going to suck on Wednesday and Friday. Totally. But if you do Monday, Wednesday, Friday lifting, your Monday session isn't going to be very recovered. It's going to be recovered, but not fully. If you do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, same lifts, your next Monday is going to be an unbelievably baller session because it's been so long since you've lifted, you're down a ton of fatigue. So then you start to throw all these calculations around. What's the optimal way to do it? Well, really, what's the biggest determinant of fatigue? The weekly average volume. And because the weekly average volume is the same in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday training versus Monday, Wednesday, Friday training, it really leads to very much the same gains in hypertrophy and strength. But because we don't see a decrement in hypertrophy in a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday condition versus Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's a pretty decent case, or at least hypothesis generating case, that functional overreaching does occur in hypertrophy. Because if it didn't, then you probably wouldn't see the same hypertrophy for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday training as you would for Monday, Wednesday, Friday training.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. All right, on to the motherfucking next. Semi-related to the last question, the arrangement of training frequency work well for a period of time, but then devolve near the end of a hypertrophy mesocycle as increasing volumes cause SRA curves to lengthen and bump into one another. Abso-fucking-lutely. And another gentleman who had a question earlier about that basically sort of got to that. Oh yeah, what's his name? Mircea Belai. When he was talking about SRA curves in microcycle 4. Yeah, totally. It's definitely a thing. But SRA curves shouldn't really change because they shorten with adaptation, but you lengthen them with increasing overload. So they should be about the same. So like, for example, if you do 6 sets of hamstrings in 1 week, in the first half of 1 week, and then 6 sets of hamstrings in the next week, you might have healed on Thursday in last week, but you'd heal on Wednesday in the next week. So what do? Well, you add 2 sets. But then you heal on Thursday again, and you add 2 sets, and you heal on Thursday again next week. So basically, the accumulation of volume throughout the week is designed to lengthen SRA curves in precisely the amount of time that they should be lengthened to keep them from shortening because they normally would. My first exposure to the idea of altering volumes actually came from a friend of mine back in the day, and he was used to it from a starting people off from training perspective. And I was like, man, 3x10 for a first time trainee really fucks him up. And he's like, why don't you start with 1x10? And I was like, it was like a paradigm shift for me. I was like, oh my God, that worked perfectly well. And then I also noticed that when I did like 3x10 programs or 5x10 programs every week, 5x10, remember, James, first week you get super fucked up. Second week would be like ideal. And the last week you feel like you barely did anything because you were so adaptive. So, your first week, you would never heal on time. You'd be like, oh, I'm still sore. And people are like, that's okay. You'll get used to it eventually. And I started thinking like, why get used to it eventually? Why not just get used to it now? So let's start with 4, then go to 5, then go to 6. The average is, 5 sets, but it's still the same average, same volume over the month, but we're never too fucked up and we're never the other way around. So I think that the SRA curves really in a well-designed program should stay about the same length from week to week to week, James. I mean, excluding the overreaching in which they get really sloppy, but then you just kind of have to deal with it.
Yeah, no, that's why, again, we kind of alluded to this in the previous question where you kind of look at the average and you say, okay, this is kind of my working number. Also, really the only time where you look at if you really want to look at SRA curves on an individual basis is when you have non-traditional microcycles. And this is really the only case for sports like track and field, where sometimes microcycles are like 9 days instead of 7 days. That's really the only time where that level of consideration should be made. The rest of the time, as we've already alluded to, should be kind of on an average that accounts for both the highs and lows of what your mesocycle will be, and more often than not, you're golden. So I would say, unless you're working with a non-traditional schedule, it's really not worth that level of analysis. You're just going to dig yourself a hole and never come back.
Analysis, or as I like to say, anal ISIS.
Anal ISIS. That's the Sean Connery Celebrity Jeopardy.
Yeah. Number 9, last question for Mr. Squeeba. In your best estimation, what is the best trade-off between cardiovascular health outcomes regarding frequency, duration, and intensity of cardio training, interference with bodybuilding, or in other words, what is the least amount of cardio you can do, still get a nice potential longevity improvement? The term nice is not quantifiable, so I cannot answer that question. But I will say that my own personal trade-off is doing a lot of cardio because I don't want to die real soon. But I think that anything under 3 to 4 sessions of 30 minutes a week of cardio that gets you at least sweating is probably not enough for cardiovascular, remotely saying that you're good with your heart, James. Those are like the American Heart Association guidelines, basically.
Yeah, I would give a more vague response, but I think is equally powerful. Unfortunately, vague questions beget vague answers, right? So that's kind of where we're at. But here's what I would say is, when you are struggling cardiovascularly to do either activities of daily living or the recreational activities that you enjoy, that is when you are underdosing your cardio per the week. So, for example, let's say that maybe you're not an avid hiker to the point where you geared out, you got all the boots, all the packs, all the poles, all this stuff, but you'd like to take a stroll with your dog or your wife once a week. If getting through that stroll is incredibly taxing and you have to take multiple breaks just to get it done, you should consider adding some more cardio at that point, right? Or if like going up and down the stairs to do laundry, to take the basket down to the basement to do your laundry is taxing for you, you need more cardio at that point, right? How much cardio? It's difficult to say, but my recommendation would be, outside of more concise constrictions, I would say your activities of daily living and your recreational activities should not be a physical burden to you. That's where I would go.
That's a good answer. Steve Blair says, hey, docs, just finished up a mini cut and was planning to do a massing phase. However, I'm suffering from some anterior shoulder upper bicep pain. Seems aggravated the most by the very bottom ROM of benching, flat and incline. So I'm thinking of laying off pressing movements completely in my next block. Do you recommend running the same massing calories as usual and adding some volume to my lower body movements? Would I be better with a modest rate of weight gain since I'm not growing as many muscle groups? I think you can grow just as many muscle groups with isolation work. It's just going to require more work. So train the fuck out of your triceps, train the shit out of your front delts with front raises, if you can tolerate that, and do a shitload of chest flies, etc., so on and so forth. You can lay off pressing movements, or maybe you're thinking just laying off of all chest, shoulder, tricep movements. There's no reason you should lay off of tricep movements, and chest and shoulders are not that big of a fraction of your body that you need to calculate anything, so I would just gain at the same rate, James.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Got nothing.
Martin Kumaru says, hello, hairy muscle daddy and James. All right, let me get something straight. Yeah. I'm not a YouTube 15-year-old fucking piece of shit, so I have no idea what the hairy muscle daddy joke is. By the way, in case you want
a recurring joke, or is this
yeah. Dude, I almost blocked this kid from Instagram, Ahmed something or other, who would literally just post hello, hairy muscle daddy on every single post. And I was like, all right, Ahmed, what's the fucking punchline, bro? And he like hit me up and he's like, hey man, I'm a big fan of your work. Please don't block me. Because I was like, I'm going to block you if you keep this up. And he's like, it's just a joke on YouTube or whatever. And I'm just like, I don't give a shit. I mean, I wasn't that mean, but I will be today. I don't give a shit. I don't want to know the hairy muscle daddy joke. Fuck you. Fuck you, Martin.
Just damn, kidding, dude. Martin. I didn't know that was like fine. a thing. I thought he was just being.
It's just the new internet. It's always the new internet thing. So I think it's like people making fun of because there's a community of gay men that I wouldn't say troll, peruse YouTube accounts of lifters and will say shit like that, but they're being serious. You're like, hey, here's my progress, and like, you look sexy. I want to see you oiled up, and you're like, God damn it, gay guy. I'm trying to be a bodybuilder, not a sex toy. But seriously, PM me if you want money, or if you want to pay me for private posing. It might come from that, but maybe Martin can tell us where it comes from. On the next question
is littered with like half naked men. It sucks.
I love it.
I hate it.
All right. You have previously said that eating a large protein meal can delay nutrient absorption, allowing protein to be released over a long period of time. With fiber and fat doing the same thing, would that mean that if I ate a large amount of fiber, then have a good amount of bedtime carbs from veggies and fruits, and also ate some fats, I could stretch out the release of amino acids, essentially rendering casein obsolete? Yes.
Yeah.
Should be mentioned that bedtime protein would come from lean meat and milk. So remember, milk is 80% casein anyway, so it's a moot point.
So just keep in mind too, like depends on the dosing of fiber. Like if you're taking so much that you're getting GI distress, then you're getting an unfavorable trade-off later.
Yeah, it'll actually run through faster. Mm-hmm. Unrelated question: does actual food volume matter, or is it only the contents? Understood as if I wanted to delay absorption, it would be better to eat a whole lot of lettuce or other very low calorie food, or is only the amount of fiber in them that matters?
I don't know.
I think arrangement probably matters, but to a smaller extent. It's certainly, the delay is not as big as if you take a fiber supplement. If you take broccoli, it's really hard to digest because it's a pretty complex structure. It takes up a lot of space. It's to be soaked up for a long time. So it's definitely going to slow down digestion more than like if you put a couple scoops of fiber powder in your protein. So definitely structure does matter. And now some sleep and strength questions.
Oh my.
Do you have any tips for falling asleep? I go to bed so I can get my 8 hours, but I always end up twisting and turning until a while later I find that I'm touching myself and thinking of fast cars and fast men, which causes me to feel tired the next day.
Mike, I get to do it. Usually you're the one to do this, but this is my first.
No, I literally right away.
No, this is where I'm going. Read the recovery book because there's actually a huge section on sleep tips.
Yeah.
Now I get to do it.
Yeah.
Usually Mike's the one who gets to say, read this other book.
Read the book. Yeah. James, do you want to throw out 2 or 3 quick sleep tips since this is RP Plus, and then read up on the recovery book?
Yeah, for sure. So a couple things that I think are really, really helpful is, one, developing a wind down routine. And this is something you do, roughly 45 to 60 minutes before bedtime. A wind down routine is essentially a relaxation routine where you follow the same sequence of events that leads to bedtime. Boom. A couple other things. Don't use your bedroom for anything other than sleeping or adult activities. A lot of people will watch TV or do their work or homework or, stuff like that in the bedroom. And unfortunately, you really just don't develop that same kind of geographical connection with that room. If you can spend as minimal amount of time in your bedroom as possible outside of sleeping, it will really help you fall asleep a little bit faster. After that, keep your room nice and cool. Nice, cool room is probably one of the easiest ways to help you fall asleep. Outside of that, there's a lot of other recommendations inside the recovery book. One that I've been playing around recently with and have been imperializing on my friends, as discovered by Mel and Mike, is the blue light glasses. The blue light glasses are something that I think can be helpful. However, it's like anything else, where if you don't use them consistently, the effect is kind of, and I have found, like, when I use them consistently, my sleep is rock solid, amazing. I don't really necessarily fall asleep faster, but I have much less sleep disturbances. When I don't use them, or if I use them inconsistently, which is the boat that I've been in lately, the effect is not very good. So it is something that can be useful, but you have to do it all the time.
There's your RP Plus answer, folks. All right. How much strength is common to lose if you do prolonged hypertrophy training? I'm going to answer this right now because I read ahead a little bit. I'm going to answer it right now, and then we'll read the rest of the question. The answer is you shouldn't be losing strength unless you're really, really strong. And then that strength comes back within a month or 2 of training. So really, really strong. My training partner, Charlie Jung, 800-pound squatter, 500-pound bencher, 700-pound deadlifter, so on and so forth. When we do hypertrophy phases with him, he can't just go in and hit his top numbers. But within a month or two of strength training, he's hitting more than his top numbers. So close. Why? Because he's been adding muscle with his hypertrophy training. So the answer is, how much strength is common to lose if you do prolonged hypertrophy training? Not much. Okay, not much. Should come back fast, or in most cases, beginners, intermediates, you should actually be gaining strength.
Mike,
now here's where. Go ahead.
So I was I've been working on that project, and this actually came up in that project. I would argue that you actually don't lose any strength. Your ability to express that strength is contextually specific to whatever type of training that you are doing.
Totally.
Right. Totally. So the underlying capacity to be strong in X, Y, or Z movements or activities remain intact. However, you cannot express that maximal strength until they are trained. That is the idea here.
Yep. Strength as expressed in the 3 to 5 rep range, for example, you do lose that, but the underlying characteristics are even better. So you gain it back and then some later. So
yeah, there is like that movement specificity component.
Been training forever. So here's where he goes on, and this is where the problems really kind of begin, and we figure out why this strength loss has happened. Been training for hypertrophy for the last 4 to 5 months or so. I used to do almost only strength work, and I'm a good bit weaker than when I started out. For example, I used to bench 70 kilos for 6 reps. Now I bench 60. Used to squat 105 kilos for 6 to 8 reps. Now I squat 90. Should be noted though, I do not seem to have lost any size. I know I should have gained size, but my nutrition was not good enough to do it at a consistent pace. So it was mostly long maintenance, followed by gaining 5 kilos because I stopped lifting as much due to moving, and because I got a girlfriend and started snacking too much. Well,
don't you blame that on your girlfriend,
Martin?
No.
Yeah. Well, he does say because I got a girlfriend. So he's blaming himself and getting a girlfriend. I mean, Martin, let's be completely honest here, man. There's almost certainly the strength losses were due to those latter factors. And if you would have gained size like you're supposed to with hypertrophy work, you would have been doing the same reps at least. And then when you would have retrained yourself to do those low reps, you would have blasted all those PRs. So the answer is you fucked up with that last stuff.
And like, going back to our previous statement, like if you switched over and did a strength block, it would have probably almost immediately come back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Last one. I'm thinking.
Mind if I go? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to pee my pants.
Okay, I'm going to take care of this one, and we'll move on to Luke Addington when you come back.
Okay, thank you.
I'm thinking that after my cut, I should gain some strength and then do hypertrophy again. So my question is, can I use the Meso 3 from the Male Physique page multiple times in a row without any drawbacks, or would you recommend doing it only once? When doing Meso 3, should one be in as large of a surplus as when doing traditional hypertrophy? When doing Meso 3, you should not be in a surplus at all. You can do it to get stronger. There are better versions. We have the powerlifting templates that are probably more up your alley. I was thinking it would be needed for recovery, but it would also lead to a disproportionately large fat gain compared to hypertrophy work because you gain less muscle. Yeah, so no, you should only gain strength in a maintenance, not a surplus. Yeah, you can use Meso 3. It's not ideal for that. Honestly, I think you should just run a Meso 1, but increase the weights on the bar a bit more than the program says and auto-regulate rate accurately, and you won't have any problems there. And that brings us to Mr. Luke Addington. Hi, Mike. Could you give an overview of what you'll be covering in the nutrition and training considerations for the Enhanced Athletes webinar? Would it be possible to go into any of that content here in RP Plus? Unfortunately, Luke, it would not, because I have a contract with those folks to save that stuff for that. Otherwise, I'm fucking ripping people off if it's available for way cheaper here. I will tell you that the stuff I'll be going into is considerations in training, how training changes when you use anabolic steroids, when you use peptides, and several other kinds of substances. We'll go by substance class and interference effect, and talk about how things change. To be completely honest, the preview is things don't change nearly as much as people think, but they do change in predictable ways. All right, I'm on Luke Addington, by the way, James.
Cool.
All right, and then question number 2, after a consult with Broderick, I was left with a lot of questions to research. For enhanced athletes, it seems like mesocycle and macrocycle design are really different animals compared to that of a natural athlete. they're not. In regards to massing for an enhanced intermediate male physique athlete, you had better be clothed, young lady. We're on video camera.
Oh shit! What's
My
happening?
wife just came in with a towel on. You guys want to see extra? You have to buy our RP Plus membership.
RP double X.
I've got clothes on.
Yeah, she's a fucking liar. She doesn't have any clothes on. Seriously, RP RP triple X, RP After Dark, is that what Carter called it?
Yeah. Bring her wife back on. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Now turn around. Yeah. All right.
Crystal was like coming in on the camera all naked.
You have to explain to your fiance why you're jacking off on RP Plus.
Yeah, she walked down and saw me like fake fapping under the table. I was like, "What are you doing?"
I can explain.
Supposed to be working.
Aren't you working?
This is what we call work nowadays, folks. All right. So, in regards to massing for an enhanced intermediate male physique athlete, I would love to hear your thoughts on Broderick's suggestion for a 14-week gain phase with no deloads, assuming the gaining phase has been paired with an appropriate cycle.
I'm going to go again.
How would you progressively overload? Say what, James?
I was like, is Mike going to go against Broderick here? Ooh.
The Clash of the Titans. 14-week gaining phase with no deloads. How would you progressively overload throughout that period? What nutritional differences are there in a gaining phase? In the above scenario with an enhanced athlete versus a natural, what recommendations might you make? Higher calories, different micronutrient considerations, etc. What other thoughts or considerations might you have pertaining to this model? Luke, you got to sign up for that fucking webinar I'm giving, which exactly goes into all of that. That is a webinar's length of material. I will say that you just get more freedom. Your MEV goes down, your MRV goes up, so you can handle longer progressions without the need for deloads, or more rapid increases in volume load. To be safe, I would say just longer progressions. Micronutrient differences don't really change much, unless you're doing really crazy shit. Calories shouldn't change much. You'll just gain more muscle and less fat, and so on and so forth. And then the next question is, assuming the athlete was on during the 14 weeks gaining phase and off for 14 weeks after, how would you approach the time period after the enhanced gaining phase? Follow maintenance resensitization phase, and if so, how long would you maintain before entering a new mini cut? Well, I'll tell you this. I am actually not in the business of giving advice on these sorts of things because I'm not sufficiently experted. Broderick is, and I would follow his advice wholeheartedly as I actually pay him to do the exact same thing for me. I will say one thing, though. I don't know dick about going on and off because, in my view, if you're serious enough to go on, you just fucking go on and you stay on and you blast and cruise. If you're going off completely after 14 weeks, that's a whole other animal. You need post-psychotherapy, training needs to change considerably, and that's honestly completely out of my depth. I will say this, as soon as you come off, your MRV falls to the fucking ground, your MEV goes up, your MV goes up. So there's a lot of changes that have to be made. That's a consult level question. Very, very particular as to what you're taking, exactly for how long, what your plan is, how you structure your post-psychotherapy, so on and so forth. Real out of RP Plus territory. But real good questions for Broderick. Finally, are there any books or other sources of information you might recommend anyone looking to learn more about this topic? Nope, because these things are usually illegal in most countries. There are no good books. William Whelan's Anabolics 2000, whatever they're up to, 2018 is probably a fine book, although I can find some pretty major faults with it. I would just say try to pay Broderick for like 5 or 6 consults in a row. Ask him all the questions you can, and you'll learn enough to last you a lifetime of use. Or just hire him as a coach, and then you don't have to worry about these sorts of things anymore. He just tells you what to do. And that's the thought.
There was a moment where I was going to read that book to try and gain expertise on the topic, and I'm so glad I stayed out of that game.
You didn't miss much.
Yeah, well, that and it's like Aladdin. It's a whole new world.
It really is. It's a huge pain in the ass. But you get more muscles, I guess. Yeah. All right. Ansuman Radhakrishnan. Oh, and since you were curious from last time, my brother's name is Aditya. A bit more mainstream as far as Indian names. Yeah, Aditya is a very common Indian name. I believe there was a gentleman named Aditya Birla who was the founder of a huge Indian empire of corporations. It was like 100 corporations under one huge corporation. It's in the story is described in Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. James, this is like the legit Indian version of like Argentinian uranium blimp guy. Like this motherfucker was real. He like owned half of India at one point. It was so fucked up.
That's
like,
so cool.
Yeah, that pretty sure when you meet a guy named Aditya, he's the guy in your class that's going to curve the fucking calculus test. And you're like, fuck.
You're like, man, fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy. All right. I just had a quick question on exactly how training a muscle 1.5 times a week looks like. I get the basic idea. One session is overloading and the other is more recovery oriented. But how do you decide how much volume is overloading and how much volume should be allocated for recovery as proportions of your weekly training volume? Well, you can't really James, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think really it's on a relative scale. But so what I mean by that is, first you start with what is overloading, and then you scale down based on that. So it would be inappropriate to kind of do it arbitrarily or in the opposite sense where and this is probably pretty obvious, but right, you might say like, okay, per session, 15 sets of chest is like pretty good for me as a starting point or as a middle ground, right? You wouldn't then say, obviously, okay, 18 sets of chest is a recovery session. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, fine, right? You obviously scale down from that, which is your working range. What I have found in my experience, for the most part, is that more than 4 or 5 sets of something really is kind of the upper limit for what would constitute a light or recovery-based session for most people, even our slow twitchers. More than 4 or 5 sets, and you're starting to really kind of push that overload threshold a little bit. For our more fast twitch people, it might be as low as 1 set. Or, usually I think kind of on average between 1 and 3 sets seems to be a pretty reasonable number. But again, it should be scaled to what is your overloading. So if you tend to be more slow twitch and need a lot of volume, it might be like 3 or 4, right? If you tend to be more fast twitch and don't need a lot to get going, it might be like 1 to 2. And for everyone else, somewhere in between that.
Yeah. Those are very, very good sort of rough landmarks. I think another way to look at it is how you don't come to 1.5 arbitrarily. You always start at 2. 1.5 is sort of foisted upon you by the constraints of adaptation, right? So all of a sudden, or constraints of recovery rather, you can't recover from 2 hard sessions. So you actually so you have these 2 hard sessions, and you know what a hard session is because it's your MRV split by 2, right? Or whatever. Your MEV to MRV split by 2. So let's say, 12 sets a week is a good stimulus for you. 1 session has 6, 1 session has 4. Then you realize that you can't actually recover from 2 sessions of 1 session has 6, another session has 6. You can't actually recover from 2 sessions of 6. Like one of them gets fucked or the other. Then what you do is you drop the other session to 4, right? You do 6 and 4 or something like that. And then, because your overall MRV is not as high as it used to be. And then potentially you eventually go to 6 and 3 or something like that. So the 1.5, the 0.5 is
arbitrary.
Common. It's arbitrary. It's not really 0.5. It's parlance for not exactly a full hard session, but the degree to which it is full and hard. Oh yeah, full hard. Anyway, porn aside, like a lazy porn girl. Like it's like Cynthia. We're on the clock here.
She's
some
checking
fucking
her
enthusiasm.
cell phone out off camera, like
Fucking kidding me? We're paying you for this. So basically, you start off with 2 overloading sessions, and then one of them just can't be as overloading, so you make it less overloading, but it's still overloading. And eventually, you get to like 1 full session and 1 sort of recovery session. Eventually, you might get to IFBB Pro shit where you train like chest one day and triceps another day, and because you do some close grip pressing with triceps, that's all the chest work you get. And because you do some compound pressing on chest day, that's all the triceps you get on that day. So it's like a 1 point, James, what would you say, like a 1.2 session at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, even just assigning decimal points to it is
silly.
It's silly. We just say that to illustrate that it's not full day. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all that's
you
meant.
Start with 2, and something's got to give. Now, you may be thinking, because you're a real smart guy, why don't we just reduce the volume of both sessions? We absolutely could do that. The thing is, it might not be possible from a joint perspective at that point and from a performance perspective. So yeah, you could reduce both sessions, but then you get 2 sessions, neither one of which really gives you like a really good pump, or makes you super sore, or makes you even remotely sore. Just kind of just getting in and kind of just doing stuff. You're like, oh, I can't do too much. So neither session is very overloading in the sense that it doesn't give you a really big pump. It doesn't feel like a hard workout. It doesn't get you at all sore. And or trying to come back and doing another session just like that, it's like both kind of fuck your joints up, and you're like, fuck, man, there's never a break. So what you do is you make one harder session, one easier session, your joints recover, and there's a distinct time where you're slightly overreaching in a miniature way to get a real big blip. And the next session still gets you a stimulus, but a very small one. You recover a little bit, and then you go on from there. So that's how that works. But remember, the shortcut answer, you can rewind this a bunch, I'm sure, and listen to it. The shortcut answer is you start from 2, and then the window closes on you, and you got to start cutting from one or the other. Cutting from both symmetrically runs into all the problems that we were answering from, I think, Philip Skleva of the asymmetry stuff. All that stuff. Yeah. And then how do you decide how much volume is overload and how much volume should be allocated in recovery? Proportions of great trainer volume. Yep. Answer that. In addition, yeah. In addition, if one session is meant to cause growth and the other is just meant to maintain and recover, does this simply this imply the existence of intra-session MEV? Yeah, it might. It might. I think advanced athletes probably have intra-session MEVs. Beginners probably don't.
Or at the very least, I think what may be more reasonable is intra-session MEV as a consideration for the advanced athlete, whereas for beginners, not.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Because the volumes needed to initiate growth or strength are so much larger, right, that splitting them between 2 equal sessions essentially does not achieve a true MEV for either at that point from an intra-session perspective.
Let me tell you, Ansuman, how through mechanistically an intra-session MEV is likely to occur. It's probably not occurring through tension, because the sum total of the tension you get through all the workouts is probably just drives the tension adaptation just as well. Intra-session MEV might occur through a potentiation effect, where once you do some number of sets of squats, your leg presses, you get a better mind-muscle connection with your quads. And because your quads are pre-exhausted from squats, or leg presses pre-exhaust your quads, you can exact less joint stress and get the same hypertrophy, because the intramyofibrillar tension per each myofibril is just as high. It takes it just as close to failure, but the total tension to the tendons and through the joints isn't the same. So if you have longer workouts, that fatigue, the same muscular fatigue that causes you to have a degrading performance, is also taking you closer and closer to failure to overload within each muscle fiber itself, but sparing the joints, right? Because if you say, why don't we just split our workout to like one heavy squat every day? Well, Jesus Christ. That heavy squat's going to be fatigue-free every time, pretty close. You're going to be going so heavy that your joints are going to get super fucked up, right? You're literally getting that. Now, for strength training, yeah, it makes a little bit more sense, right? For hypertrophy, it's like you're getting the same, intramuscular effect, but way more joint stress. Another one is we're pretty reasonably convinced that the pump, intramuscular self-swelling, has an effect on hypertrophy. And remember, the pump does not maximize after 1 set. It sure as hell doesn't maximize after 2. Most people, James, where do you think you get peak pump? Between 3 and 6 sets per session, at least?
Yeah, I was going to say around 4 for me specifically. So I think that falls right in line with that.
Sure. And that's, fuck, man, I got to write that down.
Like for me, like, and this is because I have that weird fiber typing, like 4 is great, 5, and I'm like, and it just kind of goes downhill from there. 4 is like peak masculinity, peak alphaness, and then 5, I'm like, ugh, I feel like shit.
Only after.
Because at that point, you've washed out the nervous system potentiation effect, and you've actually experienced a significant amount of like hyperemia. And so you're truly getting like occlusion and subsequent pumps from the actual work, not just like still warming up into it,
Yeah. So basically the muscle forces and fuck, James, and the occlusion. Yeah, it's another good one. You get actually an occlusion effect that way through a big pump. So the pump not only causes growth itself, very likely through mechanistic ways, it also probably occludes you, which causes even more growth. Probably adds to intramuscular fatigue too, which causes even more fiber activation and single fiber force. So through all those mechanisms, it's kind of like getting the train rolling a bit probably maximizes growth per session and thus per unit time. So now, mind you, like for beginners and early intermediates, high frequency programs are great, probably better than low frequency because they recover so quickly, and a lot of these factors, like you're not getting much of a pump when you're fucking tiny to begin with. When you get bigger and stronger, the momentum thing, the joint stress trade-off, and the muscle pump become real big factors. So I think that does develop within session MEV, and that starts to probably look like James said, somewhere around 5 sets, I think. And the last part of the question is, does this really only become important once you're, or say furthermore, does it make sense to train a muscle at 2.5 a week frequency or something like that? It could, but I think at that point you can maybe just move to 2.
That's more of a training age related thing. So if you're if you're a beginner, then yeah. If for intermediates, probably not.
Yeah, and then or does it really only become important once you're at higher levels of your sport? Yeah, I think all this stuff is really like for more advanced folks. Yeah, and the thing is, like people say, like it's so funny because like you write you write what you call an advanced training template, right? And then everyone wants to buy it. And the thing is, the advanced training template, it just looks like a template of like a person who's disabled or something like that. It's like
it looks easy.
This is actually really easy. Yeah. Like, you know, shit. Like advanced.
I do arms on one day.
Exactly. Advanced doesn't mean you get this extra growth. It means that you probably can't survive anything else that's too much. So
exactly. All right.
That's it for the list of questions.
The pre-pre's. Do you want to? I think there was a few live ones already.
Sure. Let me like log into this real quick. This is getting into some overtime, huh?
How about it? This was a long one already. We've already gone what, 2.5?
Yep.
Damn.
All right. Tony Drotnell.
Tony Drotnell.
Can you turn?
I sure hope people didn't see that.
I really don't care.
Oh shit! I don't. Wait, I want to see.
Can you turn the camera?
No, they didn't see it because James would have noticed.
I always have the. I see, like, no offense, Mike, but I don't have your face pulled up. I usually have the questions pulled up so I can.
Yeah, same here, man. Let me see. No, the door's not even remotely visible, honey. You're fine. Okay. My wife is not entirely closed. Oh, you're going to bed, honey?
Yeah. Good night.
Good night, baby. I love you.
Good night, Crystal.
Fuck, man. RP Plus got me missing my wife in bed. Fuck you guys.
We'll wrap it up here. We're almost done.
JK. Tony Drotnell says, hey, guys, a question for James today. Did you pursue recovery as your specialization because this was an area you personally struggled with? Or was it purely an academic interest? As someone who has had to learn how to be calm, it doesn't go unnoticed to me that RP's recovery guy is also the biggest stimulant fan around.
Yeah, that's pretty ironic, isn't it? No, recovery, ironically, was not my academic specialization by any means. It was more of a side pursuit. It was just something that I kind of was looking up just in my free time, just kind of like, oh, okay, cool. And to be very blunt, the only reason I ended up really digging deep into it was because I had some limited expertise, right? Not a lot, but I had done some stuff on it. And then we ended up getting a bunch of, or I think really the driving force was Nick. Nick got a bunch of questions that were recovery related, and they were very much in the realm of like ice bath, cold, heat. How important is this kind of stuff? And I think Nick understood intuitively that they're probably not very important, but he didn't have the knowledge base. He'd say, "Hey James, do you know anything about this?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay, can you deal with this for me?" And I said, "Sure." And then it just became a hot topic. And at that point, it was one of those things that I thought was worth pursuing. And I got more into it. And that was really it. Honestly, my specialization, if you look at my dissertation, was sled pushing with rugby guys. So very, very unrelated. But it was just one of those things that, like, on the side, it was kind of like a little side job for me. And it was fun. And it was I was lucky in the sense that it was a hot topic and it caught my eye, and we went with it. And it was, so far, it's been a good, successful endeavor for us. That was really it.
There you go.
But it is ironic, yeah, that I advocate for not drinking and not using excessive stimulants when I tend to be the biggest abusers of those things.
For real. Well, it makes you not seem like a purist.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yep. John Podesiak says, hey guys, need some advice for about programming from my girlfriend who wants to train non-competitively for physique purposes. She's likely classified as a beginner with a few years on and off of training, but not much experience doing the heavy compound basics. I've begun teaching her how to squat, bench, deadlift, rows, etc. The last method I programmed her was as follows. 4 days a week programming squatting, benching, and deadlifting twice a week with one overload day and one pure technique day. On overload days, I kept the sets fixed week to week in the 5-day rep range with 2.5 kilogram jumps on weight each week. On technique days, I allowed technique sets to increase weekly, but weight stayed light and fixed. Technique work was followed by assistance movements like leg press, lat pull down, etc. She progressed well and was able to tolerate weekly increases in volume. I'm struggling with determining how much frequency and volume to prescribe to movements like squat, bench, and deadlift. Should these stay easy and fixed for a few months until technique is really down and have her build up work capacity through less technical assistance work? What program would you recommend to best set her up for future success? I think that you should build a volume through the squat, bench, and deadlift and other compound basics, but make sure her technique is money, money, money on every single set and every single rep. James?
Yeah, building off of that exact suggestion, at some
just make sure she doesn't go close to failure. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think at some point, what you will essentially do is start transitioning her from pure technique days into, this might be splitting hairs for some people, but essentially, instead of doing technique days, moving into lighter days, which essentially would be a significant and notable increase in the load, though still not as much as her overloading days. And really, I think that would be kind of the next developmental landmark that you would hit, where you say, okay, your technique, based on my observations, is really good, whether it's loaded or unloaded. So now we're going to start to decrease the amount of specific technique work that you do, and we're going to increase the amount of specific fitness training that you are doing. And the majority of that volume, as Mike said, should come from those basic compound movements. So what I would do now is, once you have determined that her technique is solid, safe, and usable, start increasing the number of actual training sessions in those movements, and start off with light sessions. And then eventually you will figure out kind of the frequency through trial and error on a lot of those movements. So just as an example, I have found that my female athletes, whether they're, whatever capacity they're in, they can typically, most can bench 3 times a week, like 2 hard ones and 1 easy one. Men cannot do that. Men's typically either 2 hard ones or 1 hard one and a moderate one. Legs, same idea. Usually, like in the beginning, it's like 2.5 times per week. And eventually, once they get stronger, that gets down to 2 times. Men, more like 1.5 times. And that's just a little bit of trial and error that you'll do over time. But I think the first step will be less technique work now, more actual weight on bar and actually training stuff.
Flawless. Andrew DeSessa says, hey guys, had a question on training nutritional periodization for powerlifting. I'll be competing on August the 24th, and I've been in a surplus/maintenance through the last 20 weeks. I'm 6'2", currently 275 pounds. This is the best my leverages have ever felt, and I'm hitting PRs for the first time in years and actually staying healthy. Nice. Most likely, I've been above my MRV for too long, and it was reluctant to reduce because of my training history with football. Well, such is the case.
Yeah, that happens.
Typically, the ideal scenario would be to enter an active rest or hypertrophy block after a meet. Correct? Actually, active rest and then hypertrophy in that order. Really only going into a strength block if I had to for, say, nationals or something, to allow my soft tissue recovery to catch up. Where I'm overthinking it right now is that I'm more around 20% body fat currently. So if I was going into hypertrophy block, being in a surplus wouldn't be the best from a nutrition partitioning standpoint, but I'm hesitate to go into a deficit. I'm starting to enjoy training again since it's been my first post-injury PR in years. And I want to continue that momentum into off-season and not have to worry about taking big back steps again. Is there any point in going eucaloric during a hypertrophy block after what you recommend? Yes, there is. I was going to recommend go eucaloric, do a hypertrophy block, because hypertrophy and powerlifting isn't just hypertrophy, it's also work capacity training. Your hypertrophy is going to increase, your work capacities, or you're going to gain muscle and lose a little bit of fat because you're starting to really get on the PR train. You're going to increase your work capacity, and that's going to translate into really, really big strength gains. After you do another meet or do another strength block and you really feel confident, you can do like a real slow, super, super mild cut, 6 to 8 weeks, 0.5% body weight loss per week or a quarter even, and then that'll clean you up a little bit and get you a nice fresh platform again. James?
That was the exact route I was going to go, so you beat me to it.
Sweet. Mark Lyon says, since all biological functions are the same, according to Broderick.
Yeah, according to Bro Dick.
It was fucked up. Do you need to have times of lower protein in order to resensitize? Since all biological functions are the same, I don't believe Broderick ever said they're the same. He probably said they're similar.
They probably I think he means they operate on dose response relationships.
Yeah. So we have distinct mechanisms by which we get overexposed to carbohydrates, overexposed to calories. There's yet to be discovered a distinct mechanism for how you can be overexposed to protein. And the resensitization of that would just by no means clear that would ever be a worthwhile pursuit. Although I can't say for sure that's not the case. Maybe there's something to be discovered there, but there would need to be like a mechanism demonstrated for that.
Yeah.
Oh, Stephen Gruber came in. Oh, go ahead, James.
No, I really don't have much to add. I was just going to say, like for protein, it's been pretty clear that there's kind of a minimum threshold, and below that is suboptimal. There's kind of an ideal range, and then there's an overestimate. But after that, there doesn't really seem to be any other indications outside of those dose response relationships. Whereas carbohydrates, we can see chronic overexposure can lead to things like diabetes, right? That just doesn't exist as far as I know.
Yeah. All right. Stephen Gruber says, how can you tell if you have an intra-session MEV for a body part? You should bias more of the week's bottling to that body part in one day session. Is it whether or not you feel a pump during the session, sore the next day? Yeah, actually, Stephen, we've gone through this a little bit. So just a quick review. If you are in a position where you don't get sore at all in a body part from a given session, you don't get any pump at all, and the perception of effort is like, did I even do anything? You're probably not at your MEV. If 2 or 3 of those are good, you're probably at your MEV. If 1 of 3 of them is there, maybe. So that's kind of how, and if all 3 of them are there, you're almost certainly at your MEV. So give that some thought. And if you do thought experiments with it, actually scales to like bodybuilders, for example, like super elite bodybuilders who are training for years. What's it going to take to get them to be a little bit sore and get them a pump and get them perceived an effort a lot? Well, it makes sense. Their MEVs are really high, right? But what do you think of like a soccer mom? You first start her in her first lifting session. What's her MEV? Well, we know it's 1 set. How can you tell? Well, just from theory and literature, but also, is she going to get a pump from 1 set? Yeah, people get pumps the first time they do squats. They can't even move their fucking legs. Like, oh my God, something fucking happened to me. Like, I'm dying. Like, no, it's just a pump. Stay calm. Like, my quads are going to explode. You're like, okay, that's nice. She's going to get sore. Like people get debilitating soreness from 1 set. And her perception of effort is going to be like, fuck, that was crazy. What the hell was that? You're like, that was her first set of squats. So it all matches up. James?
Yeah, I largely agree. I was trying to think of an alternative, but can't really think of any.
Yeah, I mean, you can calculate MEVs long term or through measuring performances and performance games, but that's nothing you the much more sort of ecologically valid, super quick way to do it is through those informal metrics.
The MEV, the intra kind of MEV is a tough one because like the session MRV is easy.
That's easy.
Right, because like, how do you know if you've overreached your biceps? Can you take a shower reasonably the next day? No. Well, you're overreached.
Yeah, and also like, can you intra-session MRV means you reach a point during the session when you exceed your MRV that you cannot do overloading work past that. Like if you have back and chest in a session, how do you know you've exceeded your intra-session MRV? Because when after you train back, your chest workout is total dog shit. You can't overload because you're so fucked up and tired, like cramping and all the stuff. Like clearly, you just overdid it. So it's much more performance oriented, which is why it's easy to figure out.
Yeah. Mike, I think that's it. I think we got it.
Mike, that's pretty good. All right, folks. Dr. James is going to sign us out. We will see you guys next week. Oh, and if you're in the New York City area this weekend, we'll see you there in Long Island, where we're giving a fucking unbelievable seminar. And shit'll be fucking popping. Chad Wesley Smith, Quinn, Max, James, myself. Who's not there? Everyone else. But it's going to be a good time.
All right. Yeah. If you're in the area, come check us out. It's going to be awesome. We always have good feedback when we have the whole gang there. So always good turnout, always good feedback. So check it out if you get a chance. Folks, for next time, I am Dr. James Hoffman. You were listening to myself and Dr. Mike Israetel, and we are peacing out. Later.
Peace.